This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I am going to narrate what if Naruto became a vampire and had a Hyuga Harem. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now, wasting no more time, let's start the story.
The man in the cloak made his way to the gate that was a part of the extensive wall that surrounded Konoha's hidden village. The gatekeeper called out, "State your name and business." To quell the keeper's anger, the man called in a neutral tone, saying, "My name and my business are my own, but I wish to speak with your leader. I have a deal to discuss with him." The ninja in charge of the gate turned to face the town and saw the young child named Naruto wandering by. "Okay. I will send for an escort." His blonde hair was spiky, his blue eyes were slightly intelligent, and he had a silly smile. He was wearing a plain white shirt with a swirl and black pants, and both of his cheeks had whisker marks. He called, "Kid, take him to the Hokage." Naruto grinned even more as he turned to face him. The blonde child said, "Can do. Why are you going to see the old man?" The only response he received was, "I have a possible asset for him." Naruto gave the Hokage a casual greeting upon arriving at the office before departing. Tanic took a seat in one of the seats. "I have heard from the gate that you wish to see me. They said you wish to not state your name?" the older gentleman responded. He said plainly, as though it were a routine conversation, "I did not see the importance when I could tell you directly. I am Tanic, and I am here to train Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze." Hiruzen inquired, "How do you know of his blood?" "I could smell a Namikaze anywhere. I made a promise to protect the child of Kushina and Minato should they perish after having a child," Tanic clarified. "I had assumed that his godfather Jiraiya would be taking the role of caretaker. Then again, the council has demanded that he be left on his own for the sake of the other villagers. They will not be happy to hear about this." The elderly gentleman sighed. "Your council has been allowed to grow far too strong in a shinobi village. The civilian council was created for the purpose of voting on matters of the civilian aspects of a shinobi village, such as the trade and shops. They should not be permitted to control the life of a future shinobi." Tanic grumbled. The Hokage gave a nod of approval. "I have done what I felt was necessary. I wished to appease my council while watch over Naruto at the same time. I have failed." He placed his hand on his face. "You have allowed the boy to be beat near to death, so that the members of your council can sleep better at night, knowing that the demon brat may not make it through his own. Your methods of teaching need major improvements," was the sole observation that Tanic made. It worked as intended. "I know, during Minato's time things were different, but I am old and unable to fulfill my duties," the elderly gentleman murmured. Tanic nodded in comprehension as he said, "This is why I wish to teach Naruto. He is young, and can be raised into a great shinobi. The training that I wish to put him through will make him stronger on more aspects than you can possibly fathom. He will be faster, stronger, smarter, there will be no equal to his senses. I do not intend to turn him into a weapon, however. I will not take his emotions from him. Those are necessary. This will be good for him," he went on. The old man asked the man hiding behind a hood, "Are you sure this will help him?" With a sigh, Tanic reclined in his chair. His voice sounded cold and dark as he said, "I have repeated myself over and over again. I do not feel I have to another time. He will not be a shinobi like those you have raised. He will only be able to work in the dead of night. If you want him to work well at all, he will have endless power, unnatural strength, even by your standards. His senses will be unparalleled. He will be indestructible. An asset you will need." The man continued, clearly having practiced the words. The elderly man went on, clearly concerned for the little boy's welfare, "And you will teach him all you know, protect him when he needs it? He is the village scapegoat, so he needs much protection." "Of course." The tone contradicted the words' intended reassuring tone. The older man said, "You will tell him of his lineage?" "Yes. It is necessary for him to know who he is, and to have a solid home to live in. The estate they left behind will suffice for protection and training," was an easy response. The elderly man sighed and started copying all of the scrolls that contained knowledge about the elemental nations and the fundamental techniques. "I will give you the core curriculum of the academy so you can properly teach him what he needs to know in order to become a genin. I hope this works out." Without glancing at the other man, he explained, "Teach him this one. It is harder, but will be better for him. He will be unable to use the basic clone jutsu." He failed to notice the smile concealed within the hood. The smile was cold and malevolent, and white sharp fangs were visible. As they worked on creating a new educational program for Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, these two men talked late into the night. "I will teach him well. Please have no concerns." Naruto was startled awake by the sounds of someone else in his tiny, dilapidated apartment. He snatched the kunai from beneath his pillow and walked slowly to the door. Looking through it without showing himself, He saw that the person sitting at the table was a man wearing a deep red, nearly brown cloak. The stranger called, "Boy, it's useless to hide from me. I can hear you. Come out here." Naruto came into the room slowly. It was around 1 in the morning, which is not the ideal time for an 11-year-old to be up. The man he escorted to the Hokage's office was instantly recognizable to Naruto. "Take a seat, I have a proposition for you," he said. The man sighed when Naruto remained in his current position. The man kicked the chair and said, "I have a deal to make." "Got it? Now sit." Naruto promptly complied with the request. The man sighed and gave Naruto a scroll. "All right, I'm Tanic, and I'm going to be your new teacher. But first, I was told to give you this." Naruto nodded and dripped blood onto the seal by biting his thumb, saying, "Put a bit of blood on that seal and you can open it. Only you can open it." He opened it after it gave off a slight glow to indicate that it had taken the blood. "Greetings, Naruto. We regret having to express our regret to you in this manner. We didn't intend to inform you of this in this manner. I'm sure Old Man Hokage can fill in the rest of the details, but we'll start at the beginning of your story. Your father is me, Minato Namikaze. Please listen before you lose your mind or do anything similar. We fear we will not be able to win the battle that your mother and I are about to engage in. Since you are our only child, we have accepted that we will not be able to raise you." Kushina was overjoyed to be able to embrace you in that manner. "We have left you a list of contacts in case you need them. Hyuga Hiyashi Tanic Jiraiya Uchiha Fugaku. Senjutsu Nade Sarutobi Hiruzen. Please realize, Naruto, that we did not want the Kyuubi to be sealed inside of you. Soon after your birth, we discovered that your mother was unable to cope, so he was set free. I'm writing this letter in a hurry before I head out to battle the Kyuubi in the village. As the 4th Hokage, it is my duty to defend my people. My son, you must follow suit. Despite the fact that we have never met, we love you. Even though we are now dead, we still love you because we loved you before we even knew we were having you. You two will become excellent ninjas one day if you are good boys and learn your lessons. I have sealed several jutsus, including your mother's chakra chains, Fuinjutsu, my Hiraishin, and my Rasengan, inside this scroll. These are only available to you, and you won't be able to learn them until much later in life, if at all. Never lose sight of the fact that you are Naruto. You are loved by us." Kushina Namikaze and Minato. The only thing Naruto could do was place the papers farther away and weep over the table. Unsure of how to handle the child's cries, Tanic sat close to him. As he sealed the scroll and wiped the tears and snot from his face, he vowed, "I will be strong, knowing that my parents died to save me and my village." He had a confident and determined expression. Tanic reached over to Naruto's still bleeding hand and touched his finger to the blood, saying, "That's what I wanted to hear. Now before I take you as my apprentice I need to make sure that you are suitable." Though Naruto couldn't see it, Tanek's eyes widened as he put his finger in his mouth. The power he could taste was incredible, and the blood was sweet. Tanic typically only tasted blood to get an idea of the person's potential power. Naruto's blood was so concentrated that he could taste it in addition to sensing its immense power. Naruto asked him, "What will eating my blood tell you?" Even though he was smarter than people thought he was still unable to comprehend what that meant. The last thing Naruto remembered was the sensation of his neck being ripped apart. "It allows me to gauge your potential, and see if you would be a good apprentice. I know everything I need to know." With that, Naruto was grabbed by the front of his nightshirt, a button-up cotton long-sleeved shirt with tiny cartoon-like drawings of frogs on it. Tanic called out to the 12-year-old boy standing on a lily pad in the center of a pond, "Use your senses other than sight. I've been telling you that for months now." Naruto nodded calmly. One rock was sailing toward him from one side, and countless others were coming from all sides. Naruto avoided them by dodging and twisting, and he managed to catch the final one as it approached. It was difficult to understand how he managed to accomplish this during the darkest hours of the night. Naruto removed the blindfold from his face and said, "Tanic, why must I continue? We have finished everything that was left for me. My mother's and father's techniques are the only thing left." His eyes were blue, but there was a blood-red ring around them. Shadows danced across his features, but his eyes appeared dark. He had blonde hair with hints of red at the tips. His diet had changed, and he had grown significantly. He wore black cargo pants with bandages around his forearms and shins, a cross pendant around his neck, and a tight-fitting, breathable shirt with longer sleeves. He was slender and muscular. He was wearing a black vest over his shirt and black boots. Shortly after learning Fuinjutsu, he applied numerous intricate seals to his skin, which were hidden by the bandages on his arms. Without giving any indication of his intention, Tanic asked, "Do you think you are ready?" I do. I wish to go back to the academy. I have the means to protect myself from the sun. I have sealed myself well, please? Naruto replied with assurance. Tanic sighed, all right, then. Don't hurt anyone. You're still young. Pointed teeth flashed into the moonlight as Naruto smiled. After several hours at the front of the classroom stood Iruka. An angry face turning red. As lively as the class was, there was a dispute between two girls, a blonde and a pinkidia, about who was the class favorite. Mizuki stormed into the room as they were about to start using profanity in their argument. He shook and said, The demon brat is Baka. Iruka hesitated for a second. Nobody had any idea why Naruto had left the academy a year prior. There were wild rumors that he had given up on being a ninja or that he had been killed while being taken for training. None of these were credible to Iruka. He almost bumped into someone as he fled the room. The individual had red in their blonde hair and was tall for their age. He had two bangs that hung down over his face, and it was longer. Iruka was forced to look twice. Naruto. He seized the gaki and embraced it. With a laugh, Naruto returned the man's hug. His pendant rested on his chest, and he had changed into a black muscle shirt, cargo shorts, and plain black cloth shoes. The top layer of the cross resembled vines, while the red stone in the middle was joined by vein, like fragments of the same stone. The silver metal had intricate seals etched into it. Black wings resembled black wings and flared out to either side. A pair of sleek black rectangular sunglasses rested across his eyes. Iruka demanded, You little gaki. Why did you drop out? Naruto shrugged and reported, I got a better offer. Iruka gave a headshake. Naruto had changed in many ways, including his voice. It was smoother now, and deeper than before. Iruka grinned. Naruto grinned back and moved in front of the door, saying, Stay here, I will announce you. No, I will go. He smirked as he silently walked into the room. Except for one person, everyone missed his entrance. At first, Hinata didn't recognize him when she saw him walk into the room. Her face turned red with rage after a moment, and she muttered his name. Naruto. The individual grinned after hearing his name thanks to his extraordinary hearing. Then he smirked and turned to face her. Even for a 12-year-old girl, her beauty was astounding. Unlike the other girls in the class, she wore her hair short because the Sasuke worshippers were thought to be associated with long hair. He moved to the front of the room since no one else had yet to notice him. While Shikamaru was sleeping, Shoji was munching on a bag of barbecue-flavored chips. Kiba was playing with his little white puppy Akamaru, and Sakura and Ino were fighting once more over who Sasuke preferred. It was impossible to tell what Shino was doing. Most of the people in the room turned to watch Naruto as he cleared his throat and grinned. The students gazed at him in wonder. Another person had not only entered the room, but they had done so covertly and with such chakra control that they were undetectable. He bowed his head and said, I am a new, old student. Treat me well. Most people had figured out who this student might be, but many were perplexed. After raising an eyebrow, Shikamaru sighed and put his head back on the desk while muttering his signature phrase. Sakura returned to her royal bitchiness after admiring his new appearance. She ran at him and attempted to punch him after yelling, Naruto. Baka, stop trying to be cooler than Sasuke. But when she got to him, she struck his after image. Without chakra, he had gone out of the way quickly enough to create an image. From the opposite side of the room, Naruto gave her a fierce look. He grinned at Hinata after finding himself next to her. After saying, it's been a while, he retreated to the front of the room. When Hinata saw him move again, she felt both grateful and sad. He had grown taller and more muscular than ever before, and his clothing demonstrated his strength. I'm not your punching bag anymore, Sakura. I'm not the gaki I used to be, he said. His tone was as frigid as ice, but the statement itself contained no threats. Sakura swallowed a little and took a seat again. This time, Naruto. Baka would pay the price for defeating her. Iruka sighed and walked back into the room. As Iruka led the class outside, Mizuki nodded and said, As you can see, Naruto has returned. We need to test his abilities to rank him. At last, he would complete his work. He was dispatched by Danzo to permanently care for the demon brat. The council insisted that Sasuke be assigned to the same teacher after learning that he was undergoing special training. Dankso established a network of people to permanently shut down the demon brat after Tanic and Sarutobi refused. His efforts would be rewarded. The class watched Naruto get ready while following Iruka. When he was ready, he started to unwrap the bandages on his arms, which were a stark white in contrast to his clothing. It was only Iruka who recognized the runes that appeared on his arms. When he saw the intricate Fuinjutsu seals, he gasped. The now Extinct Whirlpool Village practiced a form of martial arts called Fuinjutsu. Naruto put his finger to his lips and looked at his teacher. Oh, okay. I need you to take as many kunai and shuriken as you can, and in 10 seconds throw as many accurately as possible. Naruto was given instructions. Sasuke grinned. He had thrown 8 shuriken on target and 2 off-center, and 5 kunai accurately and 4 slightly off-center. His score had been far higher than anyone else's. As Naruto awaited Iruka's signal, he vanished in a flash of motion and reappeared a moment later. Iruka dropped his clipboard as he approached the targets, saying, "Okay, let's see here." 13 kunai remained perfectly aligned with one another in the center of the kunai target. 20 sat exactly in line with the shuriken target. Naruto shrugged and said, "I threw all of them." The class was unable to speak. He had not only defeated Sasuke but also broken the previous record. Sasuke pushed into Naruto's face and said, "Okay, Dobi, I demand to meet this instructor of yours. He had better help me to be strong enough to get revenge, instead. Let me first say, Tanic would never train a child like you who was bent on revenge, and you would have to go through hell and back before you would even consider. I suggest that you get out of my face before I bite it off." Naruto bit his lip. Alarmed, Sasuke took a step back. He insisted that the taller boy's teeth grew and his eyes turned red, but that isn't true. As she moved to another section of the yard, Iruka said, "Next we will need to test your taijutsu." With the hilts above his shoulders, Naruto proceeded to unseal a pair of swords that settled on his back. "Iruka, I'm going to find Tenten, no one here uses swords." Mizuki walked away. Did anyone else notice that Tenten is among the few who wield weapons? Naruto grinned and positioned himself beneath a tree for shade. Hinata stood close by, grateful to be close to her crush but not hovering. When Naruto saw that she was close by, he used a little wind jutsu to blow her in his direction. He caught her as she staggered back and nearly fell. She said she was sorry, but she lost it when he laughed. She passed out as her eyes rolled back into her head. He let out a little laugh. It was going to be his responsibility to help her gain confidence. After placing her on the ground with her back against the tree, he removed his sunglasses because he could see that the sky was growing darker, almost like it was about to storm. Although they were similar to chakra, Naruto's abilities as a Kaiketsuki did not require chakra. He had the ability to manipulate the wind, water, fire, air, shadows, and illusions. Like his real form with the cross pendant around his neck, these were all sealed away. He vowed to himself that he would only use them in dire circumstances while he had them. The pendant sealed most of his power, but he was unable to leave during the day without it. He was not flawless. The fact that he was no longer human had its ups and downs, but he was still a member of a human-dominated society. His true form is exposed when the pendant is taken off. It was similar to having 2 distinct Narutos with the same mind but different bodies. Naruto stepped out of the shadows, startled out of his reverie by the incoming chakra signatures, Mizuki's and what appeared to be Tenten's. The girl wore brown hair tied back into 2 buns on her head and was dressed in traditional Chinese battle attire. On her back was a massive scroll. She gave him a wink and said, "So this is the boy you want me to fight? Looks strong." With a laugh, Naruto pulled out his swords. "I learned some of my lineage. On my mother's side, most if not all the ninja were skilled in kenjutsu. I studied and created my own style, Nagai Wasuri Kitsune no Kai." At that point, he wasn't wielding katana-style swords. Their straight back and large quarter crescent shape for the blade's main part met with a much smaller crescent that met the larger one in a point, making them strangely shaped for a ninja. The blades were blood red in color, lacked a hill guard, and had fluttering tails. The hilt was wrapped in black and tied at the bottom. With one sword in an arc above his head and the other aimed directly at the opponent's chest, his stance was straightforward but powerful. Tenten grinned and took the scroll away, saying, "So eager. I like a man who is ready for anything." Without missing a beat, Naruto answered, "I can't afford to slack in front of my senpai." According to Iruka, opponents ready. While Naruto looked at Iruka, Tenten concentrated on her scroll. A dense layer of clouds obscured the sun. Iruka called, "Begin." Tenten took the initiative, charging directly at him after releasing a naginata from her scroll. She brought the tail end of her staff to his cheek after he sidestepped and blocked her swipe. Although the hit was successful, Naruto suffered virtually no harm. Bits of wood flew off her staff as the end splintered. The only indication that Naruto had been struck was a red mark that had developed on his face. Naruto thought a broken weapon could still be useful, so Tenten blocked a strike from him while cursing. Wood was lethal to his kind. He sustained surface damage from the hit, but no underlying problems. He only hoped she wouldn't try to use it to stab him. She tossed the staff aside and opened a pair of katanas, fulfilling his hopes. They appeared evenly matched from the outside as the fight went on as before. However, Naruto appeared to be holding back to a skilled observer. Tenten also took note of this. He always ducked close but deftly, and his blows were just powerful enough to let her know he was delivering a lot of force. Iruka yelled, "Time!" and the two fighters leapt to separate. Tenten and Naruto both sheathed and sealed their swords once more. "Thank you," bowed Naruto. Tenten laughed and walked away, returning to her previous activity. Mizuki gave the boy a pat on the back and said, "Good job. If I didn't know better, you weren't fighting with all you have." The instructor was caught off guard by the insanely hard muscles he felt beneath the shirt. How did this child undergo such grueling training? Naruto returned the smile and put the sunglasses back on, saying, "I was sensei." Iruka glanced back and forth between the two before moving forward. Iruka grinned and said, "There is one last test. Basic ninjutsu." Naruto had greatly surpassed his expectations and grown much stronger. Naruto muttered, making the appropriate hand signals, "I was taught this. Shadow clone jutsu. I am unable to perform a basic clone jutsu." Around the original, 3 more Narutos appeared. Iruka inquired, "How many are you able to create?" Mizuki claimed that his target only made it more difficult to murder him. After giving the question some thought, Naruto grinned. At this point, Sakura was enraged and said, "Somewhere around 150 if I were trying a bit. I can make a lot." Without even trying, Naruto had shown her Sasuke several times, and he wouldn't even divulge his teacher. She took a kunai from her pack and threw it at the back of his head in an attempt to be cunning. Sakura replaced Naruto, who made a few subtle hand gestures. Naruto glared at the girl, forcing her to deflect her own weapon. "Substitution jutsu, impressive. Do you know any others?" Iruka responded. Naruto gave a nod and paused to reflect. "I have 2 new styles that I created. One is blood style, which is a form of manipulation and creation. Like a shadow clone, I can create blood clones. It uses a new hand sign I call the bat sign. Also, I created storm style, which is a combination of lighting and wind. This is one of my manipulation techniques for blood style." Naruto began to clarify. After creating a shadow clone as usual, he approached Sasuke and took the other boy by the shoulder. After Sasuke felt a tiny stab of a needle, the taller boy left, used Sasuke's blood to draw a seal on the clone, and made the appropriate hand signals. After that, the clone changed into a Sasuke clone. Sasuke grinned and said, "So Adobe, it looks like me." The clone said in a similar tone, "What Adobe?" Before Iruka began to laugh, the 2 Sasukes exchanged glances. "Looks like he made another you." The instructor was met with glares from both clones before the real Sasuke left in frustration. Naruto had completed the hand signals for his storm jutsu during this period and was prepared to use the final sign. He finished it with a storm style, lightning wolf strike. After that, the storm that had been circling overhead had gathered over the clone and was menacingly intensifying. Then, in the shape of a massive wolf, a single, strong lightning strike struck the ground. Kiba exclaimed, "Whoa! That's badass," as he and Akamaru were both in awe of the jutsu. With a menacing growl, the wolf turned to face the Sasuke clone. With a gasp from the real one, the clone activated its Sharingan and readied itself for self-defense. The wolf attacked Sasuke, without hesitation, aiming directly for his neck. The clone tried to hit the wolf as it approached him by dodging as much as he could, but the lightning jutsu's teeth clamped down on his shoulder and the wolf's body received more than 1,000 volts. The clone vanished in a tiny puff, and the air was filled with the stench of burning flesh. Nobody was able to respond. Iruka was amazed by the new style's strength and excellent assassination technique. Mizuki was in the middle of a crisis. Now that he couldn't match the strength of a Chunin, he had to try to kill one. The only external response came from Sasuke. He screamed right into Naruto's face, "How is it that a clone of me can use my Sharingan but I can't? Your blood holds the essence of your precious Dujutsu. I used the blood to make the clone, and because it was in your blood, he could use it. You yourself still have the block on the Sharingan. Because it was a clone of you made by me, and not you, he had the unlocked Dujutsu." Naruto clarified. "I demand Toa. You will not continue to make demands of me. I am not able to, nor willing to, teach a student. Get stronger on your own." Naruto rasped. He was aware of the redness in his eyes. He phased them in this time to make his point, but previously it was involuntary. "I said it was a style, but the storm style is more like summons. There is the wolf, which you saw, and I am currently working on a hawk, a shark, a fox, and lion. said Naruto. In panic, Mizuki could only bite his lip. If this child's strength at age 12 is any indication, he was a true genius. When he thought of a plan, he was on the verge of giving in to Danzo. Naruto was about to offer to walk Hinata home when the school bell rang, but she immediately headed for her family's estate because it was already late in the afternoon. With a shrug, Naruto understood and made his way back to his house. A one-story mansion featuring a private spring in the back and a training dojo in the basement. Tanic called out from the front door, "Naruto." After making a small alteration to the seal, Tanic was free to come and go as he pleased because the gate required blood to open. Naruto nodded back, "Master." One aspect of the house that Naruto valued was its simplicity and ease of defense. Tanic grabbed the pendant from his neck as he was heading into the kitchen for a blood pack. He let out a painful hiss as his body pushed itself into its true shape. His skin became even paler, the whisker lines on his cheeks disappeared, and the bones surrounding his body cracked as they stretched to his natural height. His head became covered in hair that turned blood red and reached his waist. Near the center slit pupil, his eyes turned blood red with a hint of gold. Both Naruto's upper and lower canines, especially the upper one, grew longer as his teeth grew. His nails developed into claws, and his muscles expanded to fit his new size. The less time you spend in that form the better. Your power needs to be free. Tanic argued. With ill-concealed disdain, Naruto looked at his master. He growled back, surrounded by a sense of power. I wanted to blend in. Becoming a hermit, only emerging from this home in the dark of night is not how I wish to spend my days. I actually remember what it is like to be human. Normal humans don't feed on blood. I could sense your lust all day. It was very off-putting, Tanic murmured. Naruto grunted as he pushed past Tanic, saying, "Okay, I'll feed." Naruto's liberated form was not going to catch fire because the sun had set just enough. That was the problem. His skin would burn instantly if he went outside because the sun's light was too pure for it to absorb. There were still plenty of people on the streets, so Naruto fled to the rooftops at a speed that was invisible to humans. He enjoyed being free, but he couldn't possibly imagine being a ninja only at night. The prisoner his seal kept out of his thoughts was the other problem. Rewind as Naruto was violently dragged to the depths of his mindscape, he abruptly clutched his head in agony, his reality disintegrating around him. From the shadows and behind the bars came a deep growling voice that said, "Finally, I get to talk to you, damn brat." Glaring at the mass, Naruto opened his crimson eyes. "I like your eyes, brat. I assume you wish to know who is speaking." The individual replied. It had an overconfident tone with a faint undertone of arrogance. Naruto felt compelled to tear the gate's seal off in order to murder the demon himself. Still glaring at the demon, Naruto rubbed his long, wild red hair idly and said, "No, actually. I'm not as stupid as I've led others to believe. You are the Kyuubi no Kitsune. The nine-tailed fox Biju. Another thing about you is that you are a female." After an uncomfortable silence, footsteps could be heard. There came a nearly nude female with 9 tails, glowing evil red eyes, and dull red hair past her ass. She was wearing short shorts on the bottom and red bandages across her small chest. She questioned, "You knew I was female? How? You smell like a female. Of course there's some fox in there too, but it's female either way." He laughed. Naruto shut his mind, cut her off, and resumed infusing seals into metal after saying, "Now that we've been introduced, I'm going to make myself perfectly clear. I'm not letting you free. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. You can beg as much as you like, but you will get nowhere fast." Flashback termination. Kyuubi tried to sound innocent as she asked, "Got a target in mind?" Naruto easily cut her off. He was an expert at reading minds when he was free. He closed his head and opened his senses to the outside world. Instinctively, he followed the sweetest scent that filled his nostrils. After taking a shower, Hinata sat in her boudoir and combed her short hair. She was wearing a simple sleeping kimono on her youthful form. She hummed softly while keeping her eyes closed. She noticed a person when there was a slight tap on her window. According to what she could see in the extremely low light, this man was extremely attractive and was dressed entirely in black. In addition, he was older than her. He was gone in an instant, and she saw his red eyes widen in shock. She took another seat after taking a look outside. She muttered, "Stranger," before returning to getting ready for bed. Naruto was stunned beyond belief. She looked beautiful, and her blood had the most delicious scent ever. He clenched his teeth, shook his head, and threw himself in the opposite direction, searching for another victim. That problem had never occurred to him before, but he had never had to worry about traveling to this side of the village either. Usually, he would enter the civilian area, where there were lawless criminals that nobody would notice. He was soon on his way after locking onto another target. Tanic was impressed. Naruto maintained his composure and even resisted temptations that would have easily defeated an experienced Kaiketsuki. He had selected an older man who was intoxicated by his odor and trying to get some action out of a girl younger than Naruto. Naruto put himself between his target and his prey and used the shadows to create the illusion because he was not afraid that the girl would recognize him, even his voice was different. The young girl, who could now be recognized as a Hyuga, took a startled step back. Naruto glanced at her and asked, "Your name?" Her pupilless eyes narrowed, but she blushed a little. The girl retorted, "Isn't it more courteous to give your name before asking for another's? I can gather who you are from your attitude. You are a main branch Hyuga. You are also very young, and there is only one person as young in the main branch. Hanabi Hyuga. Sama." Naruto raised his eyebrows. Without remembering to ask for his name, she said, "You know of me? You know of my family?" He chuckled and said, "My question to you is, who doesn't know?" He turned his attention from her to his target, who was now in a panic. Naruto showed the man his worst fear instead of letting him witness the scene as it would have unfolded had he not arrived. Naruto cautioned, "You may not want to watch this." From behind him, he heard a scoff, but chose to ignore it. She put her nose up and said, "I can do as I please." Naruto warned her and shrugged. He sunk his teeth into the man's neck after opening his mouth. Everything else vanished for a moment as the warm liquid swiftly filled his mouth. Naruto felt nothing but contentment. Although he occasionally indulged in a bowl of ramen and could eat ordinary food, he mostly survived on blood. The sweeter, the better. When Hanabi realized what he meant, he gasped. Although she had never met one before, she had always heard that Kaiketsuki were demons who never spared anyone. Naruto had finished and was facing her as she began to back away. "If that is all, I take my leave. I'm not supposed to be here, though, nor are you," he said to her. She went to leave the alley after flushing a frenzied red again, only to discover that she had no idea where she was. She chose to attempt memorizing the city on her own after a training session earlier that day, and as a result, she became lost. Before Hanabi could comprehend what Naruto's sigh meant, he had gathered her in his arms and was heading back to her clan's estate. "I will take you home." Clutching to him, she cried, "Baka, what if you drop me?" He chuckled without responding to her. Hanabi could feel the hard, taut muscles beneath his skin through his shirt. His face had all the right angles and was thinner. His eyes were menacing, but they were not malicious. The gold was charming, the red warm. Hanabi told herself to stop thinking and shook her head. "He's a Kaiketsuki. He is not human at all," she muttered to herself. Naruto heard her thoughts and laughed to himself. With a stutter, Hanabi said, "I wouldn't try to get onto the property, even at night, especially at night. We have even more guards now." Naruto continued until she gave him the location of her room, saying, "They won't notice me." She walked in after opening the window. She bowed courteously and said, "Thank you." Naruto bowed back and laughed, saying, "My pleasure," for the young miss. When she finally realized, she said, "I never heard your name." After giving it some thought, he said, "Call me Alistair. It isn't my real name, but it will suffice." Naruto departed after Hanabi nodded, as he had to return to his own estate. Tanic laughed as he caught up to his pupil. He said, "Feeling a bit righteous tonight?" Naruto looked at his teacher in the cloak. "She is the little sister of my friend, of course I'm going to save her," he murmured. Tanic had never disclosed his appearance, not even to his pupil. The man concealed both his identity and appearance. All Naruto could hear was the sound of his voice. The depth was far greater than his. The tone was rich and velvety. Not like the majority of Konoha's men. Tanic muttered, but Naruto could hear him. "Okay, I can handle that. But don't become some masked vigilante. I won't have any of that shit." Without bothering to use the gate, both men returned to the estate and took their places in the house. Naruto immediately proceeded to the bathtub. He could keep an internal heat for a day or so using its heat without raising too many red flags. It was already clear to him that tomorrow would be a long day. The Konoha Civilian Council was not pleased with Naruto's return to the academy because they knew they would be unable to deny him service if he passed his genin exam and advanced in rank. They didn't want to forfeit possible compensation simply because they turned him down, and he had money to burn all of a sudden. Additionally, he brought up issues with the training regimen to which not even the academy teachers had answers. "Why are we not training harder? It would seem to me that many if not most of us will be killed within a year after graduating from the academy and beginning our genin training. Why aren't we taught elemental jutsus? Or even battle strategy? Don't misunderstand. The basics are important and you never know when you will need them, but I'm not going to be able to defeat anyone if all I'm taught is the history of Konoha." Naruto once asked. Iruka initially concurred with him. He became irritated after witnessing numerous former pupils pass away due to their lack of readiness for life beyond the academy. Naruto would always find a way to argue with him again. Naruto, we teach what we feel will prepare you for the world, not just defeating enemies. Not everything is about fighting. Since the return of the blonde Gaki, the academy has never been the same. He had the highest test score, only behind Shikamaru, who had to start trying to maintain his position at the top. All of Sakura's attempts to get Naruto to stop acting like her Sasuke had failed. Additionally, Naruto was always seated next to Hinata. The timid girl was taken aback by the new Naruto's continued interest in her. He would speak with her and inquire about her well-being. She discovered that he was sensitive to her emotions and would take twice as many notes if she passed out during a lesson, just to make sure she didn't miss anything. Hinata knew that training with him would not only make her stronger but also bring her closer to him and allow them to spend more time together, so she wanted to have the guts to ask him to help her train. It would only require a straightforward inquiry. To find the courage, she would push herself until she was frustrated. She was more gregarious as a child and detested being as shy as she was now. The problem was that she was gregarious and kind, which hurt her in the long run because she was abused and bullied, but she never lost her kindness. She had a clear memory of what Naruto might not. Rewind. Some of the older boys would pull her hair and hurl rocks at her in an attempt to make fun of her. Hey little weakling. Why don't you fight back? You're a Hyuga, aren't you? In response, she would scream, I circa I can't, and keep her head buried in her body, balled up on the ground to take as little damage as possible. Her bodyguard, who had been told not to assist her by the Council of Elders, was standing nearby. They were supposed to make sure she was never killed, but it was acceptable if she got hurt. A little boy called out to the boys, "Hey, leave her alone." That's not nice. Before long, their focus shifted from her to the boy who had rushed over. Even though he was clearly weaker, he would still stand and fight back when they threw rocks at him and beat him to the ground. He balled his little hands into fists and threw them as well as he could, which was not bad for a 6-year-old based on his size. In order to avoid getting hurt, the older boys moved away from him. Then, without realizing it, they saw the Hyuga guard appear from his hiding place. He was supposed to stop them, they thought. The boys ran away as quickly as they could. They didn't bother to turn around to check if he was still following. Turning, Naruto extended his hand to assist the battered girl in standing up. The guard yelled, "Don't you dare touch her, you demon," and pushed the child away from his ward. In an attempt to lower her defenses, she exclaimed, Hada.san, NNN Naruto.san W. was trying to save me. The man snarled at her and took her arm, escorting her home, saying, "Hinata-sama, you are not to associate with this boy." As he pulled, she turned and saw the boy who had saved her get up and leave with his head hung low. Flashback end. The motivation was now fueled by Naruto. Like him, everyone in the class aspired to become stronger. Many people attempted to beat him up for answering questions during the class days, but they were never able to raise their hands quickly enough. The day he returned, he passed Sasuke up for rookie, and he was the top of the class. Naruto. Baka. You will never be better than Sasuke. Why do you keep trying so hard? You should just stop and go back to whoever your trainer was. Sakura used to bully every day. Naruto had become nearly impervious to it, but he would react when she included others he regarded as friends in her small-minded taunts. Sakura turned with a smug expression on her face, thinking she was being clever. Hinata will be tainted by being around you. You can't do anything right, and you will end up just making her fail with you. Nevertheless, the little brunette opened her mouth before Naruto could reply. She hardly left, nervous but loud enough to be heard, saying, Sakura.san. US. Shouldn't be so circa C. Critical of NN Naruto.kun. He is S. Stronger than you are, and then Sasuke.kun. She sat down beside him once more after getting up to speak to the pinkette, and Naruto grinned at her. He slipped a piece of paper onto her desk and said, "That was very brave of you, Hinata-chan. You need to have more confidence in yourself. Come train with me sometime. I will help you improve on your skills." Since he had moved out of his tiny apartment, he knew she would need his address, which was written on the inside. The council was aware that he had received training and had relocated to the Namikaze estate for that purpose, but they were unaware of his ancestry or that he was the fourth Hokage's son. Naruto wanted to hold off on making the announcement until he was a village ninja. He was subject to civilian authority as a citizen, but since he was a ninja, they were unable to harm him. He believed that Chunin would be a suitable age. With his head resting on the desk, arms hanging off the front, Shikamaru sighed, "This is so troublesome." Sitting on his opposite side, Kiba kept himself busier by feeding Akamaru. In the classroom, the aspiring ninjas awaited their academy final exam. All 13 of them had completed every lesson the teachers believed they could impart. Although Iruka was pleased and proud that they had all reached this point, he was worried about Naruto. He was aware that the boy would succeed in passing the test even though he couldn't use his shadow clones to do so. After all, he was regarded as the most erratic ninja. Iruka called out from the front of the room, "Sasuke Uchiha." The quiet boy got up and left after giving Naruto a fierce look. After 10 minutes, the boy returned to the room with a Konoha forehead protector. He was surrounded by fangirls who told him he did a fantastic job and that they were confident he would pass. Naruto simply returned Sakura's smug smile with a charming one. She was surprised by the look. She was used to a chilly glare, so she wasn't ready to see him smile at her. When Hinata noticed Sakura caught off guard, she couldn't help but snicker. With a look of surprise and laughter on his face, Naruto turned to face the bashful girl. After class, he had been working with her to help her train and build her confidence and strength. She had been getting better. Her endurance could be improved, even though at first she couldn't hold up against him for very long. She was becoming much stronger after being put into a routine that involved running, jogging, fast walking, and repeating the process for 3 laps around Konoha. The majority of their time together was devoted to training or creating a new taijutsu pattern specifically for her. Her flexible body was not suited to the juken she had grown up with. The ridged hairstyle was unable to match her. To aid in her integration, Naruto read a variety of taijutsu styles while poring over books. At last, he discovered the water style. It was a very fluid, elegant style that let the user bend around attacks, like water, by using their body's inherent flexibility instead of blocking. Naruto trained her gradually after introducing her and incorporating it into his own style so she could see and feel how to use it. Every week she was growing more and more independent of him. On some days, she would begin her own training early in the morning, meet with him to continue, and then head to class. Unaware that he would have eaten enough during the night to resist the temptation of her sweet blood, she would prepare lunches for the two of them. Iruka gave her a comforting smile and said, "Hinata Hyuga. Good luck, Hinata. Chan. You will do great." Naruto supported her by placing his hand on her back. After inhaling deeply, Hinata left the room. Sitting at his desk, Naruto hoped she would be alright. Without saying anything, Shino gave him a pat on the back because she could tell he was anxious. Despite her strength, Hinata was still easily agitated. Naruto realized he was glowing when the door opened and a blushing Hinata entered wearing a Konoha band around her neck. When she approached him, he stood up and embraced her. Hinata passed out for the first time in months. After chuckling, Naruto seated her in his chair. He wanted to be prepared because he knew it would soon be his turn to go up. Then Iruka called, "Naruto. You're up." Naruto left through the door and trailed Iruka to an unoccupied classroom. Naruto nodded and turned his attention to the lone chair at the end of the table. "Naruto, great. Let's start with a substitution." He substituted the chair for himself, using the appropriate hand signals. Iruka looked at the paper in front of him and said, "Good. Now a transformation." Naruto had previously struggled with this as well. A tiny puff of smoke surrounded Naruto as he made the hand signals while everyone watched, and he was quickly replaced by a near-perfect replica of Minato Namikaze. Iruka let out a little gasp when she saw that it was an older Naruto and not Minato at all. Mizuki was swearing to himself. He began to see the parallels between the orphan demon child and Konoha's savior. "Alright, last test, the clone technique. You can't use your shadow clones here, Naruto." Mizuki cracked a grin. He was aware that the boy was not allowed to use the shadow clones and that he was unable to use the standard technique. This was his opportunity. Naruto questioned, "Any clone other than the shadow clones, right?" Mizuki was caught off guard by this. He had other Justice clones. What? Without a word, Naruto summoned the illusionary part by using his Kaiketsuki abilities. He concentrated on his own body and imagined himself beside him. Like a typical clone, it moved when he did and carried out all of his actions. Mizuki did not believe it. In addition to being able to make a clone, he did so without the use of chakra. Iruka grinned and gave him the forehead protector, saying, "Perfect. I'm proud to say that you are now a genin of Konoha." They completed the simple written exam this morning, took a lunch break, and then proceeded to the practical exam. Since he was now a genin, Mizuki was unable to directly harm him. Something else would have to be tried. Fortunately, he still had 2 days to figure something out before the genin met their instructors. With the new forehead protector fastened firmly around his arm, Naruto excused himself and returned to the classroom. With a soft squeak, Hinata rushed to embrace him. Her audacious response startled him, but he was glad to hear that she was proud of him. Sakura said from her position beside Sasuke, who was gazing into space and utterly unaware of the girls around him, "It was probably some fluke that you passed. An idiot like you never would have made it on your own ability." Naruto sighed inwardly, just when I thought she couldn't get any more annoying. "Why don't you give it a rest, Sakura? You have little to no chakra. You don't train, you don't know how to control what chakra you do have, and you are one of the most annoying, selfish, bitchy, weak kunoichi we have probably ever put through the academy. You barely passed the exam, because you almost didn't have enough chakra to complete it. Have I said anything wrong? Next time you open your mouth, if it has anything to do with my lack of ability, why don't you just substitute yourself with me? Oh, that is if you have enough chakra. I believe I've made myself clear." Naruto spoke clearly. Even though he wasn't expressing his frustration or anger, Sakura could tell he was furious by the cold look in his eyes. "How can you say those things? You were dead last," she finally yelled back, seemingly oblivious to the fact that he had disrespected her. Naruto answered, rising to his full, sealed height, "Did I stutter?" Not wanting to be the object of his ire any longer, Sakura retreated. Then, fearing that his bloodlust would take over, Naruto had to leave the classroom. Even though it was impractical, his desire for blood was directly correlated with his level of rage. Because of this, unless he was certain he could control his temper, he tended to take a neutral position on issues. But he had no control over this. He couldn't help but believe that girl must have been subjected to some sort of mental block. Even though he had repeatedly put her down, she was still acting arrogant. Naruto was aware that his control was occasionally erratic due to his abundance of chakra. The exercise of tree climbing and walking on water would help with that. He was able to accomplish both, though occasionally it took several tries before he was able to reach the top of the tree. Hinata had learned the exercises from him, and she picked them up quickly. She had perfect control because of the Juken that all Hyuga are required to learn. Naruto observed that he was becoming closer to Shikamaru, Kiba, Choji, Shino, and occasionally even Ino over the preceding months. The blonde was more intelligent than she gave the impression. Naruto had persuaded Choji to try eating a healthier diet and to work on gaining muscle with her assistance. The majority of the Akamichi clan's methods could be employed without compromising a nutritious diet. They could become even more potent by using natural sugars and the energy found in nutritious foods. Though neither of them wanted to acknowledge it, it was clear that the formerly big-boned ninja had a thing for the blonde beauty. Naruto made them both admit that they liked each other. Choji because Ino was always kind to him despite the fact that he was accustomed to being bullied, and Ino because she was drawn to strong men and thus remained by Sasuke's side like a thorn. With Ino no longer bound by the magnet that was Sasuke, Ino had also become stronger, because she wasn't so focused on looking thin for someone, she had started training and was now healthier as well. The proud parents hurried through the academy as the recent graduates were leaving, trying to find out if their children had passed. Unexpected to discover Tanic leaning against the tree, Naruto walked with pride by himself. Naruto said with a hint of surprise in his voice, "You actually came. I promised your parents that I would be with you through every step of your journey, even if it means I have to come to a measly graduation that you and I both knew you would pass. Maybe not as the idiot I found you as a 2 years ago, but still you grew, didn't you?" Tanic sighed. Remembering all the times Tanic would leave in exasperation and then return a few minutes later, with a few red marks on his face from clearly slapping himself, Naruto remarked cynically, "You had such faith in me." At that moment, Naruto grinned, not a sly or covert grin, but a broad, fang-filled grin. Tanic thought of Minato because of this. The way he looked, not the fangs. He would become a handsome competitor to his father if he didn't have to seal himself and if this was his true appearance. But there was also a lot of his mother in him. Despite the fact that Tanek's training removed a significant amount of the boy's excess fat, she had a rounder face than Minato, which was somewhat reflected in Naruto. Hinata yelled, "N. Naruto.kun," from the other side of the schoolyard. He knew his confidence training had paid off when he heard her talk so loudly. She was clearly making great strides, but she still had a long way to go. She barely made it out before saying, W. Will you circa C? Come train W. With M.Me. Naruto gave her a loving pat on the head while grinning. Using a low volume, Naruto called, "Of course I will. Tanic, I will see you later tonight." The hooded figure gave a small nod and vanished from view. She said, a little sidetracked by her stutter, After all the times I've been to your house, I haven't seen him till now. That's the man that trained you. Hinata's hair had begun to grow out as well. It was long enough to perfectly frame her face, and she managed to keep her fringe out of her face. Naruto was tempted to read her thoughts as her lavender eyes gazed thoughtfully at the tree, but he told himself he would only do so against enemy ninja and anyone else he could sense was trying to harm him. He started to lead her to the gate outside the academy grounds, but Kiba, who was pulling a chain of reluctant young ninja behind him, interrupted him. Let's get a head start before anyone else gets the same idea. Kiba grinned and said, we'd like to join you in your training. He was followed by Shikamaru, who had pulled Shino, who had convinced Choji and Ino to follow suit. Naruto let out a sigh and shot Hinata a pitying look, but she gave him a little giggle in return. Through the little giggles, she stated, I don't mind training in groups. With a silent chuckle, Naruto motioned for the largely incooperative group to follow him. He guided them through the trees to a largely empty training area. It was dense and mostly forest. In certain areas, the thick leaves prevented light from penetrating. Naruto assumed there wouldn't be anyone there to bother his group because not many teams had ever gone there to train. They began by jogging a few laps around Konoha, as is customary. Kiba and the others trailed behind Naruto and Hinata, who took the lead. While he was conversing with Hinata, Naruto noticed someone else from their group. Letting go of some of his Kaiketsuki eyes, he broadened his field of vision and started searching for a pulse. Because he was a blood-feeding predator, his eyes were trained to look for a blood signature, which allowed him to pinpoint a person's precise location. When Naruto noticed a flash of steel, he grabbed Hinata's collar and hurled her back to where he knew Kiba would be shortly. After catching the bewildered girl, the boy was going to accuse Naruto of hurling his friends when he noticed that the other boy was fending off an unidentified foe. After blocking a blow, Naruto delivered a powerful roundhouse kick in retaliation, sending his opponent flying through a tree. The man groaned, but he got to his feet. With a chilly tone, Naruto said, You have had your ribs broken and a possible punctured lung. I do not suggest continuing. The man screamed, clearly in even more pain than before. He gasped in agony, I have to retrieve the Byakugan for my cage. He demands to have it. Naruto felt his fangs grow longer in rage as he gritted his teeth and said, I will not allow you to hurt Hinata-chan, no matter who sent you. Kiba, take Hinata and run. Defend her with whatever you got, take her to her family compound. He stated to the group. Everyone was startled out of their fatigue by the abrupt shift in attitude, and they assisted Hinata in leaving the area of danger. Even if you stop me, there are others going after the little Hyuga. The man sighed. Naruto looked around, noting where the sun was in the sky. Even if they get Hanabi, he could transform and save her if he can hold this man off for a few more minutes. He insisted, Who sent you? What village? The man spat a glob of blood at Naruto and asked, Why should I tell you? Because you are going to die anyway, and why shouldn't you be known for having tried to take the Byakugan for your village? Naruto betrayed him. He was aware that the man, like most people, would want to be recognized for his efforts. The greatest village, Kumo. Naruto recognized that this had already occurred as soon as he heard the village. Naruto unwrapped his arms and unsealed his swords, saying, You've been very helpful to me. Now your use has run out. No, you have to save me. If I don't get the eyes I will be killed, the man begged. Naruto stabbed the man in the heart and declared, You will be killed either way. He had no time to spare, but it was such a waste of blood. Unwrapping his arms and drawing his swords, he inhaled deeply before removing the pendant from its chain. Immediately his body started to change, his hair growing longer and changing color. The lines left by the whiskers on his cheeks disappeared. His eyes turned red, and the fangs in his mouth developed to their full length. As they repositioned themselves, the bones throughout his body cracked and creaked. It was finally over, and Naruto was free to move again. With a sudden surge of energy, he charged into Konoha, disregarding anyone or anything in his path to get to the compound. When he arrived, he saw that it was completely disorganized. Everyone was shouting for Hanabi and Hinata as they ran around. It appears that both girls were taken. Naruto swore. He ought to have realized that the Junin they sent after the Hyuga girls would always be superior to some genin. They were undoubtedly talented, but they were only recent graduates. Naruto began to leave the village, knowing he could locate them long before the ninja could. He followed the scent of the girls' blood signatures as quickly as he could. Their relationship was evident from their similarly sweet blood. He soon overtook the group. Both girls were tied and carried on the backs of some of the bigger-looking men as they ran along the tree branches. They had badges on their arms that identified them as a clandestine Enbu group for their village. Naruto applied a small amount of chakra to his vocal cords, causing them to become louder. He also added some ki behind it. His voice echoed through the forest, "You let those girls go." While he was speaking, Naruto grabbed one of the men with his speed and held him by the throat in front of the other members of the group. "WH. Who are you? You can't be a Junin. We made sure they were all on a mission before we grabbed the children. You can't be older than 14, one of the men replied. Naruto snarled and crushed the captured man's throat, saying, "I am not a ninja of this village. Nor any village for that. I work on my own. However, when you attack my friends, I can't overlook it." The other men could see they weren't dealing with a weakling because he held the man he had killed off his feet because he was taller than him. For everyone to see, Naruto smiled. The entire enemy team went pale when he flashed his teeth. One man said, "Yua, you aren't human." Naruto scoffed and said, "Very good." He created the lighting wolf by running through his storm jutsu hand signs with his speed. The men were torn to pieces by this wolf. Naruto grabbed the abducted girls and untied them during the brief distraction. They both gave him a startled look. Hanabi questioned in confusion, "Alistair. Sana, why are you here?" She had been crying, and her eyes were puffy and red. Hinata gave him a look. Her pupilless eyes briefly flashed with recognition. Without a single stutter, she said, I've seen you before. You were outside my window a long time ago." Naruto was taken aback. He never thought she would lose it here, but he knew she would eventually lose it all. "I have heard much about you, Hinata. Sama. I have heard that you are a shy person. You do not seem so shy to me, if you don't mind my speaking frank with you," Naruto said with respect. He knew that if he spoke the same as he did in his sealed form, he might be recognized, so he had to behave differently than he would on any other day. When someone shocks the hell out of you by putting your friends in critical condition, and then tying you up to kidnap your little sister, there isn't a lot of room for shyness, is there? She was about to respond. Naruto grinned a little. This side was novel. He assumed that she would gradually change her personality. He had been adding a little sass to his remarks in the hopes that she would notice and utilize them later. He hoped it wouldn't have been that quick, but the shock seemed to have accelerated it. Naruto took both of the girls in his arms, one clinging to his back as he said, "Well, I will be taking both of you ladies home." Hinata was cradled in Alistair's arms, and Hanabi was stuck on his back. Even though the night provided them with more cover, her blush was still visible. Out of the corner of Hinata's eye, she looked at the man carrying her. Although he was dressed similarly to what Naruto-kun had worn that day, there were some significant differences between the two. Although Naruto's hair had some red in it, it wasn't completely red like this Alistair person's. This man was taller and more muscular than Naruto. Perhaps they simply wore similar outfits. There was no denying the attractiveness of the man holding her. And he was strong, if he could easily hold the two girls. Before she looked around and realized she couldn't see the trees pass in detail, she hadn't even noticed his speed. A hand covering her eyes prevented her from activating her Byakugan. Alistair said, "Don't. You will only give yourself a headache." She noticed that he wasn't human after closely examining his mouth. "Yura," she stumbled after saying. Without glancing at her, he nodded, understanding her meaning. "I have no ill intent for you or your sister. I did not save you for my own personal gain. I was capable, and that's what I chose to do. You can thank me if you wish, but I do not require recognition," Naruto said. He was relieved that Tanic had taught him how to speak formally because he would have come across as very immature otherwise. Before they were launched over the walls of Konoha, Hinata could hardly see them. Before long, they were walking on the compound. A servant shouted, "Hanabi! Sama! Hinata! Sama!" and ran to the spot where the girls were placed. Another servant demanded, "You there, what have you done to them?" "I have done nothing but a service to them and to you. I was in pursuit of the kidnappers myself, before they had taken these young ladies. I just happened to save them. Shouldn't you be more grateful to have your heiresses back? I would think you would be celebrating their safe return, rather than demanding that their rescuer answer a question that does not pertain to him," Naruto responded. Hiyashi bowed his head slightly and said, "I apologize for my servants' attitudes. The whole estate has been on high alert after their capture. I understand their confusion. I couldn't help but wonder why a kidnapper would return his hostage. Was the captive useless? In that situation, many if not most of the victims would be killed." Naruto expressed his feelings. The servant's lack of awareness of that same point made him pale. Hiyashi reached for his oldest daughter, but she slapped his hand away. "I am disappointed that my eldest daughter was unable to defend herself. It would seem that she was taken easily, proving that she needs to train more, and that her training with the demon boy has thus far been useless. I have been shy, and in every session you have me spar with my little sister," hoping I will become as heartless as you. I can't be you, no matter how hard I try. I don't want to hurt Hanabi, she is my Imouto. I can't possibly hurt her. Call me weak for having a big heart, but don't you dare insult Naruto. He has been nothing but good to me since he returned. He has been supportive and helpful, much more so than any of you have ever been. Thanks to him, I am finally understanding my Juken. Thanks to him, I have started to create my own version of it, and a way to use it as a defense, as well as offense. How much of that was because of your help? None, she said. Many in their vicinity gasped. Hinata would never have made a good clan head because she was always the quiet, pliable girl. They had never seen this before. Hinata looked at Naruto and asked, Alistair.san? He knew what she wanted from him, so he hummed back, She took a step toward him and said, take me out of here. A tiny grin appeared on his face. He picked her up and held her in his arms before leaping out of the courtyard, saying, my pleasure, Hinata. With relief that her sister was finally confronting their father, Hanabi looked after them. When they sparred, she realized something was amiss. Although she was aware that Hinata was holding back, she was never able to comprehend why she permitted such a form of mockery. Naruto was aware that it was late and that he could not abandon her in the middle of nowhere by herself. He said softly, demonstrating his concern for the girl sobbing in his arms, I'm going to take you somewhere safe. All right. The man and boy I know there will take care of you, no problems? She was still the same girl even though she quickly gained a great deal of confidence. After escorting her to his estate's front gate, Naruto texted Tanic to let him know the unfortunate girl was present. After saying his goodbyes, he leapt to the opposite side of the estate, where the hot spring was, quickly undressed, and put on the pendant as quickly as he could in less than a minute. He hurried inside to change, but all he could find were black cargo pants and a white tank. He threw those on and ran to the door, where Hinata and Tanic were chatting. When he saw her, he called her name and slowed down so she wouldn't notice his speed. She grinned as she glanced up at him, then flushed at his toned physique. Hinata. Chan, how did you get home? Did they get you safe? You aren't hurt, are you? I fought off one of them, and by the time I got back they'd already captured both you and your sister. I would have followed, but Tanic said he sent someone more capable to get you. He clarified, putting on a complete ruse for her. With one eyebrow raised in response to his wet hair, she said, yeah, your friend Alistair saved Hanabi and I flipped a shit at my dad when I got home, and had him bring me here. Did I interrupt a bath? Naruto inquired, keeping in mind that the others had been harmed in the process. What happened, Hinata? Chan. You've changed so much in just an hour. The shock was too much, wasn't it? You weren't prepared to be taken like that. Oh god, what about the others? Without bothering to cover every rune on his arms, he snatched up a kunai pouch and began running in the direction of the hospital. Nurses rushed to him as soon as he rushed through the doors, telling him that he was not permitted to enter because they did not provide care for his kind. However, they told Hinata which rooms the injured genin were in when she ran in after him. Naruto sighed and followed Hinata, covering the estranged nurses with an illusion. Kiba was the first person they saw. He was lying in a hospital bed with a few tiny plasters on his face and neck and bandages wrapped around his arms. Someone who appeared to be Kiba was caring for Akamaru, who was resting on a tiny cushion beside the bed. Kiba looked at his partner and sighed, saying, hey man. Good job getting her back. We tried our hardest to protect Hera but they were too strong. You did fine. I wasn't strong enough to fight back either. But not anymore. I won't coast through training any longer. Hinata comforted him. He gave her a nod. When they went to see the others, they discovered that their circumstances were similar. They all had minor wounds, but they all wanted to be free the following day. With Hinata at his heels, Naruto nodded and walked away, carefully taking away the illusion. However, a flash of a person passed by as they were returning to Naruto's estate, and both Naruto and Hinata exchanged bewildered glances. Did you just yeah I did, was Ida? With a sigh, Naruto leapt onto the rooftops and followed the person closely, concealing any signs of chakra. Nope. I didn't make any shadow clones, and nor would they be running around with the forbidden scroll. You go back, I will fix this. After that, he changed into Iruka and sent the Hokage a shadow clone. Naruto. What the hell are you doing with that scroll? It's forbidden, how did you get it? He yelled. Oh hey Iruka. Sensei. I just thought I would use the scroll to find other cool techniques to learn, then bring them to Danzo. Sama. The phony Naruto laughed. I'm afraid I can't allow you to do that, Mizuki. Teme. Naruto gave in to his anger and felt his fangs grow once more. For him, this was an unusual evening. Mizuki grinned and tried to give the boy the scroll, saying, Naruto, perfect, just the boy I wanted to see. Now I need you to hold this for me. But Mizuki made 3 shadow clones and got ready to attack Naruto because he wouldn't accept it. He smirked, removed a large throwing star from his back, and each of the clones threw a star at Naruto. I was tasked with killing you. But you went on that stupid training trip and got stronger, so I had to be more careful about how to kill you. Now I know exactly how. I can frame you for stealing the scroll, if I can just distract you long enough. After avoiding the first 3, Naruto grabbed the final one and crushed the steel. He threw the wrecked weapon to the ground and taunted, "Any other brilliant ideas, Baka?" Mizuki gaped at him, glancing between his hand and the star. The Hokage, and the rest of the Junin ninjas of this village and Anbu are already on their way here. You are starting to run out of ideas. Naruto cracked a grin. So why is Orochimaru after our village? Revenge? Hostile takeover? What's his deal? He said casually. Mizuki insisted, "How did you know about that?" Naruto grinned and said, "The Yamanaka aren't the only ninja who can read minds." Mizuki scowled at him while clenching his teeth. "Why do you stand up for this village? Everyone here hates you. Any you want to know why?" he yelled. Naruto sighed mockingly, "Oh, please tell me. I would love to hear this." Then he detected several chakra signatures. They were all Konoha ninja. Mizuki gave an evil smile, clearly assuming Naruto was taken aback by the revelation. "Because you are a demon. Kyuubi was sealed in you 13 years ago and now you are the spawn of that evil creature." You know, that's a funny thought. Because last time Kyuubi and I had a conversation, she was cooperating and even worked on my training. That was the reality. She was tired of being ignored, and although she was bored when she attacked Konoha, she wasn't typically such a malevolent creature. Rather, she was an elderly creature who got bored easily. Even though she had never gotten into a fight with Naruto, she harbored some animosity toward Konoha and the Uchiha clan. Since the group on their way had just left the tower, Naruto smirked and decided to fuck the Teme in front of him while he still had time. She isn't the only creature around here that is evil. After applying a small amount of chakra to the pendant around his neck, Naruto was able to stop some of the sealant from flowing through the runes. Some of the seal weakened as a result, revealing his actual shape. But it was only his body, not his powers. Mizuki cried out, trembling on the ground, you are a demon." Naruto grinned at him, showing his adversary his fangs. "Just a small one. A wee baby," he sighed in response. To Naruto, Kyuubi muttered, "Ignorant bastard." He usually ignored her unless she was assisting him in his training, so it was the first time she had truly spoken to him in months. To be honest, I'm amazed at how foolish some of the men in this village are. Me. Even though I'm thousands of years old, I'm still amazed by the foolish men in your village. He scowled at the man on the ground who was mumbling, saying, "I know Q. It is hard to believe that people could be so stupid. Hello. Let me speak with him, please, 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 please. It would be entertaining." He imagined her pleading eagerly. Naruto smiled and gave her the opportunity to speak, "Only for a bit, then I take over." She snarled at him, adding key to her statement, "Kneel, you mewling Quim. You stand before one of the greatest ninja of this time. A man that you would never be." She kept laughing long after Naruto had regained control. "You will not be allowed to continue any longer on the path you have trod. Your time is up," she exclaimed. Naruto acknowledged, "You're right, that was fun." Just before the Konoha force entered the clearing, he adjusted the chakra flow through his pendant. "Naruto, thank you for stopping this man from leaving the village. If he had given that scroll to Orochimaru, we would have been in serious trouble." Sarutobi looked at his young companion. Naruto nodded and started to walk away, but he was stopped. "I am going to make this a mission. Because you stopped a potential disaster for the village, and the mention of my former student's involvement in this matter, I am going to award this AS rank. I do not want you to tell anyone about it, however. It is to remain a secret." Sarutobi told him. Naruto gave another nod before heading back home via the treetops. As he entered the house, Hinata inquired, "What was that about?" Wearing her typical navy blue pants and a tank top, she sat at his kitchen table. Naruto sat down close to her after giving her a quick glance. He smiled as he replied, "I stopped someone who was trying to frame me for something." She gave him a quick look before turning back to her cereal bowl. "Works for me. You have a lot of secrets surrounding you. I've noticed that. Another thing I noticed was the fact that you have blood packs in your fridge. All one blood type. Why is that? Last time I checked, now I could be wrong, my father is a demon. We didn't have blood in my fridge," she replied with a grin. Naruto didn't take offense. He was accepting of himself as he was. Although the term, demon, was used disparagingly, it doesn't necessarily refer to all evil when used appropriately. It's a philosophical problem with no practical answer. That's my blood type. In case I ever need blood fast, I have it safe. She held up the bowl so he could see what was inside and said, I can understand that, but you don't have food for the most part. You have milk and cereal. Shrugging, Naruto said, I eat out. This was a novel aspect of Hinata. She invaded his house out of curiosity. Seemingly excited, she repeated, what does Tanik eat then? Naruto questioned, what interests you about our diet? Because you don't even have pots or pans or anything for cooking, which if I'm going to stay here I would need to do the cooking, and there are no stains anywhere to indicate that you've ever used the kitchen. Hinata said. Naruto was aware that he was currently stuck. He knew she was not going to back down because her reasoning was sound. You wouldn't believe me if I told you, but here I am telling you anyway. Tanik isn't human. He's a Kaiketsuki. And I'm also one of them. Naruto mentally rehearsed the final sentence. She nodded with a very doubtful expression on her face and said, you're right, I don't really believe you. She exuded admirable confidence. Throughout the day, she made tremendous strides. He got up and took off his tank, muttering, okay, well, it's been a long day, and I need to relax. I'm going back to the hot spring. This caused Hinata to react. She blushed profusely and stumbled in her own words. But it was the blush that affected Naruto. The smell of her sweet blood drove him crazy. He sensed that his arms were practically reaching out to take her in his arms and bite her neck. He quickly left the room after a sharp bite of his fangs into his lower lip made him aware of his problem. Hinata gazed at the location of her former crush. Hot as hell and half nude, she knew she had to express her feelings to him. However, this was going to be difficult because her shyness was returning. For her, everything involving Naruto was a blur. Her feelings for him were uncontrollable. She said, getting up to follow him, fuck it. She glared at the door frame and humped out of the room, saying, if I can't tell my crush that I like him, then I'm not fit to be a kunoichi. Hinata took advantage of the fact that Naruto was out resolving his doppelganger unknown currency-inger problem to return to her compound and retrieve her clothing. She had returned to Naruto's estate with Hanabi's assistance. She immediately started moving in after Tanik, still wearing his cloak, showed her to a room that was hers. Her father still made an effort to stop her, even though she had her sister's assistance. Hinata. That demon should be left alone. And that strange man who took you away. He isn't human. You have no say in where you live. You are the heir to the Hyuga clan. You should accept your fate just as Hanabi has and Neji has. He screamed at her but she turned her back toward him. Hiyashi gave the order, Neji, stop her. She let her body move fluidly around his attack and violently slammed his arm aside as the brown-haired boy nodded and struck out with his jukin. She scowled and braced herself for another blow. If you think that because you are an expert at the jukin, I'm just going to give up right now. You are sorely mistaken. Cousin. She didn't use her Byakugan once during the entire battle. Neji was enraged by that fact alone. He growled and attacked with even more vigor than before, saying, you think you are so much better than me? You think that you can just brush me aside because I'm a branch family member? It is your fate to lose and to submit to me. You have no other choice. The majority of his blows missed the chakra flows, but some managed to get past her defenses. She was as elusive as water and Neji couldn't figure out how she dodged his attacks. Hinata seized her opportunity when he hesitated. With one hand on Neji's shoulder, she used an enhanced chakra strike to thrust her fist at him, striking him in the stomach. She swept his feet out from under him after this blow, causing him to fall to the ground. She felt 3 of his ribs break through his clothes when she struck him. How dare you use outside techniques? You are a Hyuga and the only techniques you should know are ours alone, Hiyashi screamed. Outside techniques? I don't know what you're talking about, I came up with that on the spot. She laughed at him. She had actually read about Tsunade and her ability to improve her punches in a book in Naruto's library. Never in her life had Hanabi been more proud of her sister. The weak Hinata had vanished, and in its place was a self-assured, arrogant Hinata who was kicking her cousin's ass. At last, Hiyashi let her go and assisted Neji in standing up. Neji gritted his teeth and said, I am sorry, Hiyashi. Dono. I was unable to stop your daughter. He knew he needed to get stronger to return her to her destined place, but he hated to admit that he was weak. After assisting Neji and making his way back to his private quarters, Hiyashi muttered, no, I am sorry, for many things. He sobbed in front of a picture frame on his desk, I should have let her be more like her mother. Before long, Hinata had finished unpacking and bidding Hanabi farewell. Standing nearby, Tanik assured the young Hyuga that her sister was well taken care of. After that, Hinata spent some time exploring. She would have to adjust to living here for a considerable amount of time without Naruto's or Tanek's assistance. She had visited some of the locations and not others. She had never visited the hot spring in the back, but she would go there. She had visited both the library and the dojo. Things started to get strange at this point after Tanik led her to the kitchen. There were no cooking utensils, pots, or pans. The only food she could find was cereal, so she grabbed a bowl to try to think about it. There was a lot of blood in the refrigerator, for Cammy knows what. Shortly after, he returned home and made every effort to avoid responding to the majority of her inquiries. The incredibly attractive man in front of her was making her increasingly irritated. At last, he simply got up and walked away, but not before removing the only thing preventing her from bleeding from her nose. Now that his shirt was off, she could see his stomach and chest in all their detail. Being raised in a home full of both men and women, he wasn't exactly the bulkiest man she had ever seen, but he was well defined for a boy his age, and she knew that would only get better with time, especially given their profession. She glared at the door he had just entered, then Humph put her bowl down on the table and followed him. Fuck it. If I can't tell my crush that I like him, then I'm not fit to be a kunoichi. Or that was her intention, anyway. Given that the estate was smaller than her entire compound, she reasoned that he couldn't have made it that far, but the jerk was no longer there. With a silent curse, she headed for the baths. She could hear someone getting ready for a bath inside. She could tell it was Naruto and not Tanik by the faint hum. Now that she was certain he was in the baths, she hurried back to her room and changed into a two-piece bathing suit. She'd never had the guts to wear it, so the tags were still on it. She no longer gave a damn about what other people thought. After making sure it was snug enough, she pulled the triangle-shaped bra piece over her voluptuous breasts and fastened it in the back before putting on the bottoms. The color of the suit was lavender, which is her favorite color in addition to being the color of her eyes. When she noticed that her lips were dry, she applied some chapstick to them and ran a hand through her hair to make sure it looked nice. She hurried back to the hot spring, feeling prepared and a little thrilled. She slid the door to the side and knocked before she went in. She alerted him to her presence by saying, "Excuse me." She saw that all of his clothes were on the floor as she continued past the tiny laundry room. She kicked them aside, making a mildly irritated face, and noted that she needed to clean the house and make sure he didn't just throw his clothes all over the place. "Naru-kun?" she asked with a tiny smile, hoping that the abruptly adorable moniker would catch his eye. She could tell it had taken effect because of the sputtering in the water. He called out from somewhere in the water, Naru-kun. It was difficult for her to see him because of the steam in the air from the hot water. In the hopes that it would help, she turned on her Byakugan, and it did. She discovered him sitting by himself on the far side of the spring. She descended the stairs into the water, knowing that he could probably see her, and moved through, in his direction. She knelt in the water, which was perhaps waist deep when she was standing, as she was directly in front of him. With his body nearly bare and his hair slicked back with water, her love interest looked even more alluring when he was completely soaked. He had a startled expression on his face as he examined every inch of her body. She took care to keep his gaze fixed on her face. "Na.ru.kun," she said, smiling amusedly. His smile was tentative, as if he was surprised by it but enjoyed hearing it. He wasn't to blame. He extended his arm to touch her face, tracing his fingers over her cheeks and encircling her chin. A stray hair was tucked behind her ear by him. His touch was tender and loving, and it made her smile. A tiny tug brought her face closer to his as his hand moved to the back of her neck. Their lips had touched just enough to cause a flush to appear on both her and his face. The kiss went a little deeper as she stepped closer. Naruto was staring at this stunning girl in front of him with his eyes slightly open. There was no denying his feelings for her. Hinata's thoughts were racing. A range of emotions were pulsing through her heart. Love, passion, joy, excitement, and expectation. Pressing her lips against his, she opened them slightly, allowing him to open them as well. He gave a little gasp and bit his lip, and she lightly touched his teeth and lips with her tongue. Naruto leaned back from her kiss as a result. A slight expression of disappointment crossed her face. She whispered, "Did you not like the kiss?" He stammered a little as he said, "I did like it, it was so sudden though." But she could tell he was lying because he wouldn't look her in the eyes. With a sigh, Hinata got up and fled in a flurry of leaves, saying, "Let me know when you want to tell me the truth." She was running through the trees with tears welling up in her eyes. She didn't think he would so obviously turn her down. He appeared to like her. What on earth? How could he have allowed her to humiliate herself in such a way? She would have his balls on a golden platter if he were to approach her at this moment. She could see a little better in the dark than she had previously, and her eyes had taken on a faintly silvery appearance. She was unaware that she had used her Byakugan. She located a tall tree that she could scale and ascended it. She was sitting there looking completely pissed off and ill-dressed. "And what is a lovely lady such as yourself doing so far from town and ever so alone?" I was making the faces I thought I would see while typing that, you know? Think of Flynn Rider from Tangled. Smolder. Suddenly, a man rose up over her. "Not only is it no concern of yours, but I'm really fucking pissed, so if you want to keep the family jewels where they are, then you'd better leave." She grumbled in her teeth. She could tell the man was intoxicated because he didn't seem to understand her and his face had a slight red tint. "Screw this." She kicked him in the balls with such force that he fell off the tree branch she had been perched on. As he fell, she snarled at him, "That's for not leaving and not taking me seriously." When Hinata realized she would not be left alone, she got back up and moved to the last location she could. Hinata moaned as she pressed her head against the hospital window's glass. "Ino, please open your window." The blonde had been reading when she was awake. After allowing her to enter the room, Ino asked, "Why are you here?" Ino couldn't help but make an angry face after reading the story. "That bastard. If I ever hear about him doing something like that to you again, I swear to Kami that I will not only take his balls from you, but crush them under my boots until they look like small little piles of mush." Ino comforted Hinata. The two girls were unaware of Naruto's motivation for pushing her away. Because of their close proximity, he could smell her blood while they were kissing, and he was struggling mightily to resist the urge to bite her. Additionally, her tongue in his mouth gave him an erection so strong he felt like he was going to crack, pushing him over the edge. Then Hinata did something she hadn't expected to do, even though she had clearly done it before. She broke down in tears. She was crying and her anger had mostly subsided. She simply sobbed as she placed herself in Ino's lap. The blonde simply gave her friends a pitiful smile and rubbed them back. Though he knew it wasn't the right moment, Naruto wanted to enter at that moment in the hopes of comforting the girl he had made cry. Rather, he returned home, got her a change of clothes, stuck a note on the windowsill, and left it there. Hinata sat up and looked out the window when she heard a knock. Before they could be identified, a figure had leapt away, but she recognized Tanik or Naruto from the clothing on the sill. The note dropped to the ground as she snatched up the clothing. "Hinata-chan, I can't express how sorry I am enough. It shouldn't have happened that way. I just wanted to let you know that I didn't lie because I didn't enjoy the kiss. In fact, I adored it. I also love you more. You can't imagine how terrified I was to discover you were gone. I searched the grounds, the estate, and even the woods surrounding the house for you. I knew you had been through there when I discovered a man unconscious on the ground at the base of a tree. You have no idea how much I value you. In addition to becoming one of my closest friends, you have also grown to be the woman I adore. I'm aware that my apology won't make a difference right now. I hope speaking with Ino helped. The harm I caused is done. I detest witnessing your tears, especially when I caused them. Do not hesitate to speak with anyone else you feel you need to talk to. In addition to being at home, I might see you tomorrow and the day after. I don't blame you if you now despise me. I would also despise myself. Naruto." As she completed the letter, Hinata couldn't control the tears that fell down her cheeks. After reading it over her shoulder, Ino smiled slightly at her friend. Hinata was preoccupied with the fact that Naruto loved her too, but he had not explained why he had lied. She went to the bathroom and changed into the clothes he had left. Ino said, "You should go home." Hinata sighed and said, "I know." The girl left through the window, using the rooftops to return to her new home, saying, "Thanks Ino, you have no idea how much that meant to me." The new clothes were warmer on her. Alistair himself was waiting beneath the front gate's lamplight. As she passed him and entered the estate, Hinata questioned, "How did Hanabi know you? Why does it seem like you always show up when someone is in need of something?" The shrug suggested that he hadn't given a damn, because Naruto tasked me with talking with you. He seemed distraught over your disappearance. "Yeah, well you'd think that telling the truth would be easy after telling a girl that you love her," replied Hinata. "Why couldn't he just talk to me? Like is it really that hard to talk to me? He knew where I was." She went on. Alistair appeared to be growing a little irritated with this discussion. "Trust me when I say that Naruto had the best intentions. He wants to give you space so you don't rip his balls off." She was quoted in the air. "So he heard that," she thought, smirking a little. Keeping her away from the gate, Alistair nodded. In an attempt to keep Hanabi from associating with the wrong crowd, Hinata demanded, "You never answered my question. How do you know Hanabi? How did she know who you are?" "I saved her life. Your little sister has almost no sense of direction, and she got lost in a bad part of town. I happened to be in need of food at the time, and I took down the man who was attacking her. I then escorted her home. He turned to Hinata. There was something familiar about his eyes. It sounded much too informal for strangers. She stepped around him and attempted to open the gate, saying, "Okay, I believe you. Now I'm really tired. Please let me pass, I wish to sleep." It refused to move. Alistair grinned slightly and flashed his teeth as he said, "I need to bring you inside because it doesn't have your blood signature yet." Hinata gave him an ill-concealed look of disdain. Although she didn't like him, she was grateful that he had saved her life. She didn't like how much of an asshole he was. Without a word, she let him pick her up and jump over the gate before entering and making her way to her room. A short while later, Naruto knocked on the door, clearly hoping to discuss what had transpired. Hinata snarled into her pillow, "I will speak to you tomorrow, just let me sleep." She was aware that he could hear her, and she knew he had paid attention when he left. That night, her dreams were clear. Deep, eerie laughter and glowing red eyes, as well as witnessing Naruto being bitten by Alistair and waking up only when his eyes were also glowing red. Hinata sat up hard, breathing heavily. In an effort to find her location, she protectively wrapped the blankets around herself in her cold room. Then she recalled, and after looking around, she saw that she was in her spare room in Naruto's home. She got up thinking about him, changed out of the clothes he had left at the hospital, and entered the living room wearing a tank top and shorts. Because she had used some of the stealth training Naruto had given her, she wasn't sure if Tanic had noticed her presence, but he was there, his hood still in place. At times, she even managed to ambush him. He raked his hand through his hair and let out a loud sigh. The sight of a red hair flicking out from under the hood startled Hinata. Hinata had already noticed it when he hastily smoothed it down. Were Tanic and Alistair the same individual? She had seen Tanic and Alistair together, so that was impossible. Furthermore, Alistair appeared to be becoming motionless, whereas Tanic was taller and appeared to be a fully grown man. She let Tanic know she was there by clearing her throat. He turned to her and grinned. He pointed to the kitchen, and she noticed Naruto there as well. "I knew you were standing there, sweetie. Come on over." When she saw him, her eyes hardened, and he turned away in embarrassment. Tanic looked at the two kids and said, "I needn't be here for this." Although Hinata nodded in agreement, Naruto shook his head. He walked away briskly, saying, "I shall leave you to it then." With pain in his voice, Naruto said, "I want to explain." She sat down and said, "Better start talking then." He sighed as he looked at her. He sighed, knowing she wouldn't fully comprehend what he was saying. "I was taken by surprise, which as you know is hard to do. I couldn't focus on sanity when you were standing in front of me, scantily dressed, and when we kissed, I nearly lost it. You were beautiful. You are always beautiful, but tonight just helped me to justify that everything about you is beautiful." He cracked a sad face. Without hesitation, Naruto declared, "I realized how much I loved you. You grew on me, from a friend to a trusted partner, to the woman that I love with all my heart." Hinata felt the rage leave her. She sighed and extended her hand to grasp his. "I'm sorry that I took you by surprise. I was fighting with myself over my confidence to confess to you, and ended up going a touch too far. I told myself if I want to be a strong kunoichi, then I had to be strong enough to confess to the boy I've loved since before the academy." She said to him. Grinning, he got up and walked around the table to stand beside her. He was across from her, and the table could seat at least 8 people, so she had to release his hand for him to do that. Grabbing her hand once more, he pulled her up and embraced her. Even though Naruto himself tended to get a little chilly, she let herself melt into his embrace and found it to be warm. She could feel his powerful legs against hers, her hands running down his back, and the flush of her body against his. She could feel every muscle in his body. In addition to admiring the beauty before him, Naruto was thinking about how she was flush against his body and how he could never shake the sensation. He found the ideal spot to place it when her head reached his chin. He put his hands over her shoulders and laid his head on hers. He pressed his forehead against hers and pulled back just enough to make her meet his gaze. With a soft smile, he inquired, "Are we good now?" She returned the smile, her eyes full of confidence, love, and joy. He knew he loved that face right away. In order to express his love for her kisses, Naruto leaned down even further and gave her a gentle peck on the lips. He took it more slowly, got a cute pout in return, and walked to the couch to signal that she should come talk to him. He pulled her into another embrace after she sat down and gave her his signature kiss. He pulled her closer to him as she moved her arms to encircle his neck, slightly intensifying their kiss. They had made up, and he trusted Tanic to leave the room. Sitting on the couch next to him, Hinata seemed to be growing impatient with him as she leaned closer, if that was possible, and rubbed her body against his as best she could. She realized that this was not going to work, so she got up and settled into his lap. Although he was aware that his lust for her was causing uncontrollable reactions, Naruto tried his best to keep his body under control. Knowing that he was hers to take, Hinata herself was struggling to keep from ripping his clothes off because she wanted to see him in his entirety. She believed that the ninja's life was brief and that, although tragic, mission deaths occurred frequently, and she had to accept that. Nevertheless, she believed that even though they were young, they had every right to try new things together because they had no idea when one of them would perish on a mission. She pressed her lips against his neck, just below his jawline, and briefly opened his mouth. She moved his shirt aside and kissed her way down to his collarbone, only hearing a tiny gasp of breath from Naruto. As she went on, she became conscious of his erection and discovered that a small shift in her hips caused him to shift beneath her. As she rocked her hips back and forth over his nearly tight pants, Naruto found it even more difficult to resist stealing her for himself. As she leaned over him, he ran his hands around to her back and found the bottom of her shirt, letting his fingers lightly touch her back. She let her shirt move as she felt his hands brush against her back. She mostly slept in a sports bra, which prevented her developing breasts from being an inconvenience at night. Even though her C-cup breasts were impressive for a 13-year-old, they were dysfunctional for a ninja. By placing his hand on her back, Naruto was able to feel the bottom of her bra and gently work his hand underneath it, discovering that her tank top had also risen in the front. Hinata resisted the impulse to lower her shirt. She was anxious because her body had never been viewed in this manner before, even though she was sure she loved him and would make a commitment to him. Apparently sensing this, Naruto took his hand off beneath her shirt and put it back on her back, above her clothes. After gently pushing her head aside, he kissed her neck, nibbling at her earlobe and licking it in spots. She groaned a little as her cheeks began to flush more deeply. She reacted even more loudly when he gently bit her neck. Naruto used his eyes to ask for permission before placing his hand on her stomach, just where her shirt was slightly upturned. At first, she seemed apprehensive, so he took off his shirt to reassure her. As she absorbed his body, the redness in her cheeks seemed to intensify. Even though she had previously seen him without a shirt, she was still in awe of his sculpture. Though not overdone, his chest was well defined. Even though he was thin, you could still see the shape of all his muscles, indicating that he was still quite muscular. She stopped at his pant line and moved her hand down his chest and abs. Her lips formed a smile as she slowly took off her own shirt, almost painfully, in an attempt to make fun of the boy beneath her. He bit his lip and observed her growing self-assurance. She was a little ticklish when he ran his hands down her arm and shoulder before coming back up to her side. This made him smile mischievously as he ran his fingers up and down her sides, causing the tormented girl to scream and giggle loudly. Feeling Naruto follow her so he could carry on torturing her, she collapsed onto the couch. However, Hinata struck back, dragging him down to kiss her once more. He followed, grinning at her lips, knowing that he would use that against her in some way later. She shivered when Naruto ran his hands up her sides once more, and he played with her bra a little while once more requesting her consent with his eyes. She spoke this time. In the hopes that the darkness would provide her with cover, she said, "If you turn the lights off." Naruto had vision as good in the dark as he did in the light, so that wasn't going to work out the way she had hoped. But after nodding, he got up and switched off the lights because he knew that would make her feel more at ease. He gave his eyes a moment to adjust. The knowledge that she would eventually let him see her fully made Hinata feel safer, but for now he would have to wait. With ease, he located the couch once more and lowered himself onto her, running his fingers through her hair and supporting himself on his arms on either side of her head. In addition to running her hand down his back, she also touched his ass. She let him slide his tongue into her mouth after he gently bit her lip. After arguing over who should control the little dance they were doing, they eventually settled on a beat that allowed them to both access each other's mouths. Naruto felt her delicate hands glide over his body, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could tolerate her brief touches. Her beauty alone was torturing him enough, but the gentleness was killing him. Knowing that he wanted to take charge for a while, she giggled a little when he substituted himself for her and ended up on his back while she was lying down on him. She sensed him putting his hands beneath her arms, on her sides, and directly next to her breasts. After fiddling with the bra, he moved it up and over her breasts before letting her take off her head and arms. Everything except her shorts exposed her to him. Squeezing and feeling the warmth of her breasts, he moved his hands over them. Hinata was suppressing every sound she could, from groaning to a little heaving when he touched her. She let him turn her over once more and felt his lips brush against her left nipple. His tongue moved deftly as he continued to squeeze and push the other with his right hand. Naruto stepped back to give her a long kiss after she couldn't control the groan of pleasure that came out of her mouth. They were both getting more excited as he pressed his hips against hers and exerted pressure on her. Keeping his hand on her hip, Naruto placed his hands on her thighs and moved it slightly up her shorts. He wanted her panties taken off because he could feel their soft fabric. Hinata had other plans, though, as she reached down and felt his pants button. She undid it and the zipper quite easily, pulling them down as far as she could. He laughed a little as she sulked at not being able to take them off all by herself. She used her Byakugan to see the size of his not quite hard dick through his black boxers after he moved them off his body. In an ancient gesture that even Tannic training couldn't break, he placed his hand on the back of his head. His size caused Hinata to flush. She knew she could get an orgasm with just her own 2 fingers, so she wasn't sure he could fit all the way inside her. Knowing that she would have to take off her own shorts next, she did so slowly, wanting to make fun of her current boyfriend once more. He shifted her hands more quickly and gave a small growl. Knowing that she was being cruel to him, she giggled and let him. Without any delay, he removed her panty line and ran his tongue down the middle of her chest. He put his hands on her attractive ass and raised her legs to his shoulders before she could object. He was going crazy because he could smell her. She felt a tremor run through her body as he used his tongue to separate her lips, knowing she would be sweet to the taste. For the first time, he tasted her after inserting his tongue into her vagina. He moved his tongue expertly in and out of Hinata's pussy while she groaned. He was so good at it that Hinata couldn't help but wonder if he had done this before. She tried to extend her orgasm as she could feel it intensifying, but then she let out a warning squeak and climaxed into Naruto's face. She had a brief orgasm because he had worked her sufficiently. As he licked his lips and gazed at her with his now deep blue eyes, she suppressed the loud moan. She could now see some of Naruto because her eyes had adapted to the darkness. She was engrossed in the color that his had taken, even though she knew that hers was also darker with lust. He smiled at her and put her back on the couch before taking off his own boxers, which were now tented. As his manhood was released from its grip, he felt it jiggle a little. Hinata then reached down and took it in her smaller hand, moving it up and down. With a sigh of satisfaction, Naruto walked down to her entrance. Since most kunoichi found that to be the case due to the movement of their livelihood or because they experimented with their reactions on their own, he assumed that by this point her hymen had been broken. She felt the pain of the first time as she nodded. Her face twisted slightly as she gasped, and she was aware that she was bleeding a little. Naruto waited for her to move independently so she could get used to it and enjoy it. The thrusts were painful at first when she nodded, but as he settled into a rhythm, she started to groan with pleasure. She was aware that he was stretching her with each thrust as he filled her up completely. He quickened his pace, and she started to notice that the groans were growing louder. She stepped out between thrusts and said, N.Naru.to.kun. He picked up the pace even more when he heard his name. She was snug and warm around his dick, and Naruto knew she was having as much fun as he was, so he couldn't help but want to move more quickly. With a husky voice that grew deeper with pleasure, he said, Hinata. Hyme. In a gasping sentence, she declared that she was as well, and he could feel himself almost approaching. Not wanting to conceive at 13, Naruto swiftly withdrew and landed on her stomach. Naruto collapsed onto the couch as Hinata arrived shortly after. Even though he hadn't had to sleep in months, this had exhausted him and, to be honest, made him believe that he would. As he went to get her some sort of tissue to wipe it off, he said, I apologize for getting you covered in cum. It's alright. I don't want to get pregnant and you took care of that for me. Although next time you have a condom or we don't continue. He smiled at her. He chuckled and assisted her in washing. He assisted her in putting her clothes back on while asking, would you like to sleep with me? She nodded and followed him to the house's main bedroom, joking, I thought I just did. She lay down, feeling him step in front of her and put his arm around her waist because the bed was bigger than hers. Grinning, she nestled her face against his neck and slept peacefully there. She woke up that morning without having any more dreams. She had opened her eyes to find Naruto awake. He grinned and said, good morning, Hina. Hyme. She returned the smile. She continued to use his pet name, good morning Naru.kun, and got out of bed. With a sigh, she entered the main bathroom and said, I don't know about you, but I need a shower. When she arrived, she noticed a glass-walled shower. She was eager to return to Naruto, so she hurriedly showered. He grinned as she entered, wearing shorts and a tank top, and a towel around her neck to absorb the water that was dripping from her hair. Naruto reasoned that he could go to the store that day and get her some food even though they didn't have any in the house. He didn't need it, and since he hadn't eaten in the previous 2 days, He also understood that he needed to eat tonight. Given that they would most likely be sharing a bed going forward, that was going to be difficult. He was confident that he could use a shadow clone to solve the problem, but Hinata had seen them before and he wasn't sure it would work. He just needed to find the way, which he knew existed. He reasoned that he could focus on training today for both Hinata and himself. He led Hinata to the spacious training area outside after obtaining a scroll from the library in his home's basement. I want to teach you the Kage Bushin no Jutsu. I believe that you are capable, and it would be deadly with your modified Jukin. Naruto said with a grin. She returned the smile, still worn out and achy from their evening together, but eager to learn. She performed the hand signals after he explained them to her, creating a horribly ill-looking image of herself. Even Junin found it difficult to create the jutsu, but by the end of the day, she was able to create 2 clones with Naruto's encouragement and a smile. I want you to send those clones into the house, have them play rock paper scissors, and then dispel them. Naruto said. With a nod, Hinata followed instructions. After 2 minutes, she shook her head and blinked. She sounded perplexed as she remarked, the clone who won did it by scissors. Good. One of the perks of the shadow clone jutsu is that when the clones dispel they take the memories with them. They are solid clones, as well as they each have their own chakra systems. He told her. With a smile on her face, she informed him that she was tired from training with so much chakra in a single day and would be napping. After considering every seal he could think of that would help her with that, Naruto decided to have her work on her chakra reserves. He knew there would be one that he only needed to work on, draining the chakra and entering it into her. He was able to produce 200 clones while she was away. You put in 50 hours on the Rasengan's first stage and 100 hours on the Hiraishin. He explained clearly what needed to be done, saying, the rest of us are going to be doing strength and speed training. Up the gravity seals to 100 pounds a limb. Many of them yelled, sure boss, and went to work. At that point, he produced 2 additional clones. The 2 clones changed their appearances and departed after he gave them the list. Both of you henge into someone average and buy food and cooking supplies. Hinata left me a list. He sat down and read through the seals once more, letting out a sigh. When he finally located one, it would enable her to keep training during the day and replenish her chakra coils the same night, allowing them to grow exponentially over time. The only issue was that she would have to be nude when he painted the seals on her body because they needed to make contact with both her skin and all of her chakra points. The thought made him sigh. He could attempt to have one of the girls he knew, possibly Inoa, do it, but he would probably have to draw the lines connecting each point on a life-sized scale himself. This was the issue. His hair was growing longer and would eventually need to be pulled back, so he ran his hands through it. Since his real form had longer hair, he reasoned that his sealed form should also have it since he thought it would fit him better. One more sigh. Tanik approached his apprentice after noticing that he was contemplating. Tanik made the observation that, you don't know how she will feel until you talk to her. Naruto looked at his sensei and nodded. Then Naruto said, I have a question. Tanik said, speak. Although he could see where this was going, he preferred that his student ask questions. Why do you hide your appearance from me? Am I not trustworthy? He inquired. Behind the hood, Tanik grinned. Despite his best efforts to quell the boy's curiosity, he knew that curiosity would eventually grow. I have tried to keep my identity hidden because I felt that you knowing it would put you in danger from my enemies. However, we have not had any problems thus far, and I feel that you are ready to know, he sighed. Remembering that Tanik wasn't as good at hiding in plain sight, Naruto questioned, we need to wait until nighttime, correct? That is correct. However, you will need to create a clone to spend time with your new girlfriend, because we don't want her to worry. You should tell her that it is a clone, rather than let her find out. He chuckled. Naruto assumed that would occur and nodded. He dismissed them one by one, sending a clone inside to speak to her, realizing that the Hiraishin's concept was simpler than he had initially believed. Unlike the body flicker techniques, it was not a teleportation jutsu. In addition to employing the unique pronged kunai with a tag as a tether and a destination, this space and time jutsu opened a small rift in space and instantly transported the user to the location where they threw the combination. It was straightforward but complex due to the difficulty in determining the right chakra balance. Although he hadn't taken over training the boy in a long time, Tanik was impressed by the knowledge that Naruto was demonstrating during the training and knew that the boy was capable of handling something new. He said, vanishing and then resurfacing holding a scroll, I have something for you. This is a summoning contract. It is something that only a select few people have ever signed, because of how selective the summons are. I have talked with the boss, and he told me that if I felt that you were capable, then I would be allowed to let you sign. Tanik gave the scroll to Naruto, who laughed at the sensei. The fact that he knew so little about the man made it difficult to relate to him, but this was bringing them closer. Naruto put his handprint at the bottom and signed it in blood. Alright, these are the hand signs. After you go through them, place your hand on the ground, Tanic said. Following instructions, Naruto muttered summoning jutsu. A silver tiger cub appeared where Naruto's hand had been a moment earlier, and there was a puff of air. Hi there, I'm Jin. I'm the youngest son of the Tiger Clan boss. I'm surprised to see someone so young summoning us, the cub said, almost grinning. I'm Naruto, it's a pleasure to be given the opportunity to summon you. Naruto gave a bow. The cub bowed and vanished into the smoke once more. You will get along with my sister. I will go back and let you summon her now. In addition to using a little more chakra and performing another summon, Naruto performed the hand signs once more. He was replaced this time by a larger lavender-furred cub. She pointed to Naruto and said, I am Ayame. My brother talks about a young summoner. Is this you? That is me. My name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. It is a pleasure to meet you. He raised his head. This cub, who was scrutinized, appeared to be much more rigid about formality than her brother. She said to no one in particular, he will do. Then she vanished into the smoke. Naruto nodded when Tanic told him, I want you to summon the boss. I warn you he will be a bit pickier than his offspring. Naruto found himself on the back of a huge orange and black tiger following the hand signals and a significant amount of chakra. The voice was growling and grave. I am Yoshino Hotaka. Who dares summon me? It said loudly. Sharpening his nerves, Naruto spoke up. I am Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, son of the 4th Hokage, and student to Tanic. I have summoned you, he said with respect. Son of Minato, huh? Your father is well known in the summoning worlds, his choice of summons were the toads. Why have you chosen the tigers? Replied Yoshino. He bowed low in respect for the big animal, saying, My father is no longer alive, and I have no way of finding the toad summoning contract. As such, I now feel that the tiger contract is better suited to me. Yoshino said, Move so I shall see you. From behind, Naruto leapt to the grass in front of him. You look like your father. I have one test that I have to give in order for you to be allowed to summon me again. You must avoid being found by me for the next 4 hours. If you cannot keep from being detected, then you will be forced to remove your name from our contract. Is that understood? Naruto gave a nod. Seeing that the daylight was fading, Naruto took advantage of the opportunity to not only run to the forest at nearly full speed but also to release some of his seal. I will give you a moment to disappear. He created an illusion around himself and concealed all of his chakra behind it using the powers that had now been unlocked. The illusions functioned similarly to genjutsu, which Naruto was never able to develop due to his excessive chakra. As a master of illusions, he was able to dispel any genjutsu, but without his kaiketsuki skills, he couldn't create it. Then, since he didn't need air anyhow, he stopped breathing. Kaiketsuki didn't require water, food, or air. They were in between the world of the living and the world of the dead, but they weren't regarded as dead. The dead would be not even dead because the dead were zombies. Naruto concentrated on his illusion and quieted all of his thoughts. Expertly woven, it concealed his odor, concealed him from the outside world, and covered him in several layers of what appeared to be bushes. He made the bush as solid as possible so that if someone went through it, they would only see more bushes and leaves. Although Tanic was aware that Naruto would pass this test with ease, Yoshino was truly taken aback by how skillfully the boy had concealed himself. The big tiger shrank in size to speak with his other summoner. You have trained him in your arts well. I had not known that he was a Kaiketsuki until he released his seal. He is a seal master as well? He learned sealing on his own, slaving over scrolls and books for hours on end. Most of what he learned I did not need to teach him so much as supervise. However, his taijutsu and kenjutsu I did have to instruct him on. His ninjutsu was just practicing on targets, and his clone techniques, both of them, were his own training. I am solely his trainer, and come the time when he no longer needs my help, I will no longer be here. I must return to my own home. Tanic continued. When he saw that the sun had set, he sighed and lowered his hood. His red eyes were exposed as his long red hair fell out. In his freed form, Naruto bore a striking resemblance to a younger Tanic. The man had longer hair and was taller, but his face was flawless. He had a thin face, and his natural color was red, as evidenced by the red scruff that was growing in. Yoshino gave his longtime friend a nod. The boy had been through a lot. The village has turned him into their pariah, and his friends know nothing of his sealed form, or his tenant. He fights every day. It is quite inspiring. Tanic was proud of his pupil. That is why I have chosen to not give him a harder test. His life has been a test on its own, and I felt that he deserved to have something easy for once," Yoshino said. He realized that the boy had vanished from sight as soon as the test started, so he stopped looking for him. The boy had received good training. When addressing someone of greater age and authority, he was aware of proper etiquette. He knew how to deal with the challenges he faced. He was a young man of great intelligence. After 4 hours of holding his illusion, Naruto came out of it, exhausted and in need of nourishment. In addition to not having eaten, his body suffered quite negative consequences from using the abilities without first being fed. Feeling the seal force its full release, Naruto clenched his jaw and tore it from around his neck. Tanic cursed as he felt the power surge. He ought to have recalled what transpired when Naruto skipped meals. He had not yet turned 10 years old when the infants were regarded as toddlers, so he was still a young Kaiketsuki. Even though he was only in his 3rd year, he still required work, despite his incredible control over his lust and hunger. After Tanic promptly alerted Yoshino to the problem, the tiger boss swore and used his young to protect every human in the vicinity. Naruto sensed that lust was beginning to control his thoughts and endanger everyone in his vicinity. While he had control, he did the only thing he could. He left the village. He knew that there were smaller villages outside and that he could find blood there, so he went looking for food. He heard a scream and pursued it until he discovered a woman bound to a tree, her clothing ripped off, and her body covered in cuts and bruises. Although the blood was alluring, Naruto's rage at seeing a man rape someone took precedence, and he used one hand to grab the mana who was taller than Naruto but appeared to be a civiliana by the nape of the neck. Before he could think any further, he threw the man into the trees across a small clearing and was on his neck. The pain of not eating subsided as the blood poured past his lips and down his throat. The man's consciousness was gradually fading, and he would soon lose the ability to wake up. After being drained, Naruto got to his feet, cut the woman's securing ropes with one of his nails, and removed his top to respect her modesty. After carrying her back to the nearby tiny village, he placed the woman on the ground and knocked on the door that said it was a doctor's office. She looked at him and said, "You saved me." His first impression was that she was a shinobi. The fact that she held herself as one in the chakra coursing through her body spoke volumes. Naruto thought he would inquire later as to how she was apprehended by a civilian. Naruto shrugged and said, "I was in the area, it was the right thing to do." Tanic. "Tell Hinata I'll be back in the morning. I'm fine in a village. My pendant is with me." Naruto mentally communicated with his sensei. Naruto and the kunoichi he had rescued were led inside after the door had been opened. The doctor, afraid to touch the woman for fear of upsetting her, asked, "How did this happen? What happened?" "I was in the bar, alone while trying to travel to Konohagakure. The next thing I knew I was blacking out and then woke up tied to a tree, with some bastard hanging over me with his dick out trying to rape me. If this man hadn't come along to save me, I would probably still be tied to that tree." She yelled with rage. With a sigh, Naruto examined her without touching her using a diagnostic jutsu he had discovered in his father's library. She struggled, as evidenced by the fight, and she had been bound up, as evidenced by the rope burns on her ankles and wrists. Naruto, who himself cut her down, witnessed that as well. Although she was bloodied and bruised, the cuts were superficial, and that was the extent of her issue. Although dressing the wounds would have been a good first step, the civilian doctor was unsure of how to handle healing a kunoichi. Since it would be quicker, Naruto asked if he could heal her for him. After that, she could get dressed and leave. If necessary, he could escort her. After receiving confirmation from the woman, whose name was Haru Tanaka, the doctor nodded and proceeded to heal her. Naruto immediately went to work, wondering how he seemed to be constantly involved in these problems. Playing the hero in trouble seemed to follow him everywhere. He sighed, put his hands by his sides, and walked away, declaring that he was going to get some clothes. Before someone finally gave him the clothes he requested and slammed the door in his face, the entire neighborhood was terrified to open their doors. He was aware that he appeared to be a demon because he was in his freed form. Using the eyes, hair, and teeth as a guide, it was easy to determine. However, as time passed, Naruto became aware that a tiny black mark was beginning to appear on his neck, directly over the area where Tanic had bitten him. Later, he planned to question the man about it, but for now, Naruto knew it would change because it was a strange mark that appeared to take on a specific shape. After giving Haru the clothing, the two ninjas soon set out for the village. He knew he had some questions for Haru, who kept stealing glances at him. He sighed, "All right. Ask away." The kunoichi gave him a startled look. "How did you? Never mind. I want to know who you are, so I can properly thank you, and how you found me." as well as what you are, because it is clear you aren't human," she said openly. "Simply put, it's similar to a kunoichi." Naruto sighed as he considered. "I go by many names, although the most common is Alistair. You may call me what you wish. I happened to be in the area and heard your scream." "How are you so certain that I do not have a blood limit, or a keke genkai?" Naruto responded with a grin on her face. "Well, because I have one. Plus, I've studied enough about them over time to know that there is no such blood limit out there," he replied. He looked at her out of the corner of his eye and said, "Okay. You are right. I am not human. I am a Kaiketsuki." She had no forehead protector to display to a village or clan, and she appeared to be a few years older than him. Her bright green eyes and dark blonde hair made her stand out from the rest of the villagers. He was tall for his age, though he was still growing, and she was shorter. She began to say, "That's how you took that man out, isn't it, Yua?" before her face turned a little green. "I can assume that my diet is disgusting to you. I can understand, but I want you to understand me. I have no choice, it is what sustains me. You humans have to eat as well, don't you? Pigs, cows, chickens, rabbit, whatever you can find that will help you survive. I choose only those who have done evil, and that man had done something unforgivable. What about those animals? Have they done anything to deserve being slaughtered?" Naruto asked, rather nonchalantly than with a sense Haru was caught off guard by this. She had never considered it that way, but all she could picture was a cartoon of herself mooing while chewing on the back of a humorous cow. She nodded and shook her head at the picture. She bowed her head and said, "I understand, and apologize for criticizing your diet." Naruto gave a nod. They soon arrived at the village gates, and Naruto went back to his house after escorting Haru into the elderly man's office for her business. He turned around and replaced his clone in bed with Hinata with himself, putting the pendant back around his neck. After kissing her forehead, he promised himself that he would ask the elderly man what was happening in the morning. After lying down with Hinata during the night, Naruto sighed and sat up. He was irritated and seeking clarification, not exhausted. He changed and headed to the Hokage's office after writing a brief note to Hinata explaining his whereabouts. When he entered, the secretary outside merely gave him a glare. He looked at her and flashed that old foxy smile of his childhood in a very muted form. The woman's face blushed slightly, and she turned her head away in disgust. All he needed was that response. He approached her desk, grinning. He said courteously, "I'd like to see the Hokage. If you would." With a nearly incoherent mumble, the secretary pressed the pager. The demon brat started to say, "Hokage. Sama, the Dima Uzumaki-san is here to see you." She refrained from saying it. She disliked him and the Kyuubi for attacking her town, even though she wasn't one of the more fervent haters. "All right. Send him in please." Naruto heard the old man's voice from the pager. Seeing the weary old man open the door for him, Naruto nodded and proceeded to the office. He said, "Naruto, what can I do for you? I would like to discuss with you what happened last night, and the arrival of one Haru Tanaka." Naruto got straight to business, knowing how the old man could get sidetracked fairly easily. "I'm not sure what there is to discuss. She was a ninja of this village, up until about 5 years ago, when she went on a training mission outside the village. Her return was unplanned, and her mentor was killed outside the village. She is a Junin in strength. I'm not sure I understand why you need to know." He glanced at the youngster. Since only the Hokage would understand, Naruto enunciated the me. "I found her last night, after she had been raped in the middle of a forest. Of course I'm concerned for her. As well, she knows me." Sarutobi let out a sigh. As was their duty, Anbu was always present in his office, tucked away in the shadows and out of sight. But Naruto could always sense when others were around. Nobody could evade him. He was very good at everything he did, and his tracking was superb. He used techniques other than genjutsu. "She doesn't know your true identity, and plus, she is fine now. I'm surprised at how fast she had bounced back from such an encounter." He thought about it. "That's because she was drugged. She doesn't remember it. Plus, I killed the rapist." Naruto sighed. The Hokage said, "I suppose. Is there anything else that you need now?" After a brief hesitation, Naruto shook his head. "No, I just hope I end up on a good genin team," he said. Sarutobi looked up at him at this point. The older man questioned, "What makes you think you will be on a bad team?" With a simple shrug, Naruto walked out of the office, stopping along the way to pick up some flowers. He found some violets to give to Hinata when he entered the Yamanaka flower shop. When Ino saw that the young man was purchasing them for her friend, she grinned. In an attempt to get him to divulge the personal information, Ino asked, "So, you and Hinata make up?" Ino loved gossip and was one of Konoha's biggest gossip queens, despite the fact that a kunoichi was supposed to be good at keeping secrets. He grinned and told her that he would not be speaking, saying, "We are good now, thanks for asking." With a sigh, she took his money and gave him his change. Naruto walked away, waving over his shoulder, saying, "You should get ready for the academy, we are getting our teams today." Since many of the villagers had not yet woken up and it was still early in the morning, the walk was serene. After putting the flowers by Hinata's bed, Naruto entered his estate and proceeded to shower. He felt a pair of hands stroking his chest and stomach as he was washing the soap from his hair. The warm water warmed his body for the day. He looked over his shoulder and grinned, saying, "Good morning, Hyme." The smaller girl, whose hair was unkempt from sleep, had her arms wrapped around him. He saw that she was wearing a bathing suit when she smiled at him. Her modest attempt to join him in the shower made him laugh. He grinned and said, "So you can see me and I can't see you." Despite blushing, she remained silent. He kissed her head and said, "I'm kidding, love, don't feel pressured. When you are ready, that's when we will move on." "I'm done, Hyme, but I will let you shower. Be quick, we have to be at the academy soon." He grinned. She nodded and showered after he left. She was taken aback by Naruto's breakfast of cereal, milk, toast, and eggs. He chuckled at her response, saying, "I know how to cook, it's a miracle I know. I got food yesterday too." He knew how to cook, but he didn't need to eat. He sat down with her and drank blood. Spent coffee. Because coffee was almost black, it was one of the few ways he could drink blood in public without drawing attention to himself. Before long, they were both fully outfitted as ninjas and headed out. As usual, Naruto wore a black muscle shirt with black gauntlet, like gloves, and black pants with the bottoms wrapped, while Hinata wore a violet running jacket over a mesh ninja suit and black shirt and black pants. Even though everyone was aware of the runes on his hands, he didn't have to flash them in everyone's face whenever he was around because the gauntlets concealed them. He slicked his hair back with water, and he liked not having it in his face even though he knew it would dry out spiky. Like his father's, it was wild. He grinned up at the mountain faces that provided a view of Konoha. The grave expression on his father's face guarded him. He wished Kushina and Minato were pleased with their son. He and Hinata entered and sat down close to Shikamaru, who was sleeping as usual. An instant later, Choji and Ino entered. Shouting something about beating Ino out for the seat next to Sasuke, Sakura burst in. Ino sat next to her crush after glancing at the pinkette. Ino and Choji had long expressed their affections for one another, even though they were not yet dating. Hinata liked to claim some of the credit, but Naruto took the majority. When Iruka finally entered, he was smiling. He yelled loudly, "I will now announce the teams." Numerous teams were composed of civilians, and many of the civilians were accompanied by other civilians. A civilian and a clan ninja were rarely assigned to the same team. There were two sighs and a loud squeal after the names of the new team members. Team 7, headed by Kakashi Hatake, Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Naruto Uzumaki. Sakura yelled, smugly, "Eat it, Ino. Pig. I got Sasuke-kun as my team member." Naruto. "Baka, don't drag us down." For attention. As she turned to face Hinata, a sudden chill came from behind her. "Bitch, you should watch what you say. Wouldn't you be the one to drag them down with your low chakra? No taijutsu, no genjutsu, barely passable ninjutsu, and oversized fucking head." Hinata exploded. With a proud smile, Naruto took his girlfriend's hand. Sakura was surprised. She was unaware of the attempt on the lives of Hinata and Hanabi, so she was taken aback by the abrupt transformation of the typically quiet and reserved girl. "What the hell?" Sakura blurted out. "Hinata." The girl shook her head and said, "Shit happens." Those who participated in the attempt to prevent her change were aware of it, but many other students in the class were taken aback. Partly ignoring the students' teasing, Iruka went on, Team 8 headed by Kurenai Yuihi, Shino Aburame, Kiba Inuzuka, and Hinata Hyuga. Naruto whispered, "At least you have friends on your team." They were a tracking team, but they all had potential, Hinata shrugged. With his methods requiring brute force and moderate speed, Kiba was already somewhat of a powerhouse, and Hinata was also growing into a formidable force. The team's sensei entered at that precise moment. Since the death of her own mother, Hinata had known the woman. In addition to protecting the young girl, Kurenai had chosen to have her on her team so that she could develop. She became more determined after witnessing Naruto's assistance. She would support her team's development. She said, "Team 8, follow me." Hinata confidently returned the black-haired beauty's smile. The confidence caused Kurenai's red eyes to slightly widen. It had been expanding at an exponential rate, but this was remarkable. Kurenai was aware of the kidnapping, but she didn't anticipate it would have such a profound impact on her. It seemed like a lot had happened. She was going to find out, of course. One of the men entered the room and gathered his team, saying, Team 9 is still in progress from last year. Team 10. Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara, and Choji Akamichi. Your sensei is Asuma Sarutobi. Only the 3 members of Team 7 are left to wait. Iruka looked at the children who were waiting and said, there is an 11th team, but each of those members will receive a letter in their mail within the day with instructions. Wait here. He was aware of Kakashi's terrible tendency to arrive late. All he could hope was that they wouldn't have to wait so long. Naruto was aware of Kakashi, a well-known ninja who had studied under his father. Although he should have been pleased to be on the team, he was aware that the man worshipped Uchiha and that Sakura and he would not receive much training. Naruto sighed and partially undid the pendant's seal, just enough to communicate with the Kyuubi. In his mental landscape, Naruto entered the fox demon's room, which resembled a sewer, after meandering through the dank hallway. Her fur was a little wet from the air, and she lay comfortably on her stomach in plain sight. She smiled mischievously and said, I have a deal for you. What sort of deal? If this involves you taking over my body, then you can think again, Naruto laughed. No, it doesn't. Anyway, my deal involves training you. Also, my name is not Kyuubi. My name is Akane. You will do well to remember that brat. She barked at him. It was a fitting name for her. Naruto flicked something from under his nail and said, your name is lovely. And what kind of training? Although it would be risky if any of the Yamanaka got the wrong idea and attempted to enter his mind, he maintained some fairly powerful illusions to fend off the possibility. In his mind, he was fully unsealed. Although it was true that she was bored when she attacked, there was a deeper reason that no one had ever known before, and the compliment to her name startled her a little. Naruto wasn't her biggest fan. With a sigh, Akane changed from her kitsune to human form. If you find a way to release me from this cage, and change the background of your mindscape, I will consider training you to use your mother's chakra chains. I will teach you the demonic ninjutsus, and even help you with your strength and endurance. Before you ask why, let me tell you. I hate being stuck in here as much as you hate having me here, but I hate that it is so dreary and cold more. If you found a way to give me some freedom to move in here, I'd like that. Even better, if you remove the cage. She spoke with an exhausted tone. He was extremely strong already, but he had so much more potential, and even though she detested going so low, she would not have a weak container. How long has it been? Naruto inquired. I will think on that. 2 hours, your sensei is arriving. Naruto nodded and stepped out of his seal, solidifying the pendant's runes. He opened his eyes to see that the sensei had summoned everyone to the roof in addition to Sakura yelling at him, which he had thankfully ignored. Naruto sighed as he tested his body flicker technique for the first time, having just recently figured it out. He appeared a rooftop over, vanishing in a red glow. He muttered to himself, not where I intended, but not bad, and jumped to where Kakashi was waiting. Junin, who only had one eye, appeared somewhat taken aback by the boy's appearance. It was even more amazing that he had made his own body flicker because no genin he had ever met knew what it was. Shortly after, his other 2 members showed up, and they all took seats in front of the sensei. Kakashi began, I'd like for you all to introduce yourselves. Naruto sighed and said, how about you go first, show us how it's done. Alright. My name is Kakashi Hitaki, my likes and dislikes are none of your concern, and my hobbies are for me to know and you to never find out. I have no dreams. He said this with a grin on his face. Kakashi Hitaki, also known as the copycat ninja. You are a Junin of Konoha. You enjoy reading the smut series Icha Icha. You have a Sharingan eye implanted, and you dislike smart-ass children. You dream to one day repay your old teammate Obito for all he did for you. Naruto laughed as he spoke. The older ninja paled a little at this. How did? He asked first. Naruto Uzumaki. My likes are Hina, Chan, training, a good game of shogi, ramen, and my friends. My dislikes are people who assume that they know someone and boss them around, and people who assume that they are entitled to the world. I also greatly dislike perverts and lazy assholes. My hobbies are training, playing music, and reading. I dream to one day be strong enough to protect everyone that I love, and prove my worth to everyone who doubts me. Naruto said, then continued to disregard what the other were saying. The Uchiha was discussing killing his brother once more after Sakura said something critical of him. He dropped 3 sheets of paper and vanished in a cloud of leaves after saying, okay. Meet at this training ground tomorrow at 7, don't be late, and don't eat anything. Well, until then. With a sigh, Naruto turned to go, but Sasuke stopped him. The obstinate boy reiterated, I demand that you train me. How many times do I have to say no before the word sounds like nonsense and doesn't mean anything? Asked Naruto. He quietly made a shadow clone and used it to replace himself, then he returned home and expelled the clone. Before hurriedly leaving, Sasuke had attempted to make him do so. 2 letters were in the mailbox when Naruto checked it. He quickly located Kurenai's team after learning what it was about, and after waiting in the shadows until she had finished speaking, he emerged. He had read the letter and discovered that Kiba and Hinata were both on the 11th team. Naruto bowed to the sensei and said, "I'm sorry if I'm disturbing you, but I have to borrow Kiba and Hinata for the remainder of the evening." She gave them a startled look but brushed them off, saying something along the lines of Kakashi. Before she was shown the letter, Hinata questioned, "Naruto, what's this about?" Naruto smiled and replied, "The 3 of us are on a separate genin team, as well as our original teams. They met at Training Ground 44 after receiving Kiba's letter. It was a vast, dense, and dark forest. Glad to see you 3 could make it." 2 voices, both clearly female, emerged from the forest and said, "I would have hated to have to break in another team." Although Naruto was aware of their presence, Kiba and Hinata both assumed stances in response to their unexpected appearance, which put them on high alert. Naruto smirked as he vanished and reappeared with 2 women pursuing him. "Calm down, they belong to our sensei." "Hey, come back here," yelled one, hurling kunai in his direction. Smirking, the other remained with the genin. "Anko, you can't just pelt me with kunai just because I haven't said hi to you lately," Naruto yelled, deftly avoiding each blow she threw at him. The crazy snake lady yelled, "Aw come on Gaki, you know I just want to have some fun," but was quickly stopped by an ice barrier. The other woman said, "Anko, he isn't the only genin we are in charge of." She was instantly identified by Naruto as Haru, the person she had assisted the other day. Although she didn't know him yet, she would soon. Anko sighed and returned to the ground, saying, "Okay, Gaki, join us. We are Team 11, also known as the Shadow Team. While I understand your confusion, why is there another team, made up of genin, who have teams? Well, we felt that you all could use extra training, outside of what your senseis were giving you. As well, we are a more specialized team, although that won't start until you all are at least Chunin," Haru said. "I am Haru Tanaka. I enjoy being with friends and family. I like the man who saved my life not long ago, and I like Pocky. I dislike rapists, perverts and basically all men who disregard women. I enjoy gardening, and playing pranks," she said. Naruto chuckled to himself. She was already going to be a difficult person. "My name is Anko Mitarashi, and I enjoy certain snakes, Dango, Haru, Chan, my friend Kurenai, Chan, and Naruto.kun. My dislikes are essentially the same as Haru's, with the exception that I detest a particular man." Her manic smile sent shivers down everyone's spines. "Since you all know each other, we can spare you the introductions, we will get to know you over time. Now, onto the main deal. Our team is going to be a specialized assassination, stealth team, hence the name. We will be training you all on stealth, tracking, and assassination techniques that will help in the future. We will not baby you. You will learn fast, and it will be hard." Haru was serious. Naruto grinned because he knew this team would be powerful. His fangs grew a little longer in bloodlust as he nodded. Although he didn't publicly display his bloodlust, it was unquestionably present in the back of his mind. It was possible that this was due to Akane's influence or his Kaiketsuki side, but he liked the sensation of blood on his hands. "Tomorrow, each of you have your assignments with your regular senseis. It will be a test to see how well you work with the other genin. That being said, we have our own tests," Anko laughed. "We want you to not only do that test, but see if you can go undetected by your sensei and teammates during the test. For you two, Hinata and Kiba, that means from each other as well. Rest assured, even if you're caught, it doesn't mean that you can't be on the team. It just means you need a lot more work than we thought." The 2 women grinned at the others. Naruto smirked as he excused himself from Hinata to attend to something, and they all went home. She nodded, assuming he would return soon enough. Then, Naruto followed Haru and found himself in the same area as his old apartment. After taking off his pendant, he knocked on her door. She yelled, "You," and pulled him into her position. When she first saw him, she was beaming. She went into the kitchen to get herself a drink and asked him, "How did you know where I lived?" Naruto followed her into the kitchen and said, "I have a secret I wish to share with you." He was standing in front of her when she turned. Naruto saved her drink after she almost dropped it. With an eyebrow raised, she questioned, "What is your secret that you feel you have to share with me?" With a sigh, Naruto put the pendant back around his neck. Haru's expression alternated between amusement, shock, anger, denial, shock, and finally a simple sneer as he changed back. She kept saying, "You, my student, you saw me naked. Yua. With a sigh, Naruto simply stood there, uncertain of what to say. He was forced to remove his shirt as she rounded on him. She had previously seen him without it, and although he wasn't sure what she was trying to say with the gesture, she seemed happy with what she discovered. She inquired, "How many other people know this?" Naruto stated, "You, the Hokage, and my original trainer Tanik." She pointed to him and said, "Which one of you is real? Like this or the other one?" He folded his hands and took a seat at the nearby table. Naruto shrugged and said, "While all together this is the real me, this is what I would have looked like had I not been turned." Haru, who was seated at the other end of the table, said, "How old are you, kid? You're really smart for your age." "I'm 13. However, in my released form I look to be 16, and mentally I'm probably about 20. He breathed deeply. She appeared to finally comprehend and nodded. Haru finally said, "I see. Well, I hope this doesn't end up biting me in the ass later." She grinned and led him to the door, saying, "You should go. You have Hinata to take care of, as well as 2 tests tomorrow, although I have no doubt that they both will be relatively easy for you." After laughing, he returned home and spent yet another amazing evening with his significant other. N. It won't be a total smut. I might just make references to them instead of writing in lemons. Both of them woke up early the following morning and traveled to the testing locations. After learning that Akane could control time in his mind, Naruto used the time before Kakashi arrived to train with him. As a result, 2 weeks passed inside while 2 hours passed outside. 10 minutes before the sensei arrived, he came out to find Sakura sneering at him for not working with her and Sasuke dozing. The emo boy, who Naruto wasn't even certain liked girls, didn't like her at all, so he ignored her in the hopes that she would wake up one day. The boy didn't like anyone, but there was a serious brother complex there. Kakashi finally showed up. "You're late." The banshee with the pink hair exclaimed in a high-pitched voice. She affected Naruto's keen hearing, causing him to wince. "Sorry, I was lost on the road of life and Naruto cut in with ease, "Complete bullshit, but whatever you say." Kakashi gave his arrogant pupil a little glare. "The test is easy. You have to get one of the 2 bells to pass, and you have to pass the test to be an official genin." Naruto quickly understood what the test was measuring, and Kakashi was interested in how well they collaborated. "What about just 2 bells? Does that imply one of us won't succeed?" Sakura inquired, and Naruto couldn't help but grimace. How could she have failed to notice that she was the smartest girl in the academy? "He is assessing collaboration. In addition, are you familiar with 2-man genin teams?" Naruto inquired. "I was aware of Naruto. Baka, I wanted you to know, so I asked," she shot back, but Kakashi hadn't even responded, "So I did." Naruto sighed, relieved to be on the opposing team because he already hated this one. "All right, I'll get started." Kakashi grinned at them, saying, "You have until 12 to get a bell. If you don't I will tie you to one of the posts, and you won't get lunch." Naruto got up from his seat and stretched his aching muscles. It had been a while since he had a workout like the one he had with Akane, and it felt good to get stronger again. After flickering behind the boy and putting a kunai at his throat, Kakashi grinned and said, "Whoa, no need to be hasty. I'm not. Furthermore, this isn't even me." Naruto grinned and vanished with a minuscule puff of smoke, causing Kakashi's eye to widen. He hadn't even realized that it wasn't Naruto. "You ought to exercise greater caution." From where he had been sitting on the post, Naruto said, "If I were an enemy, you'd be dead." Sakura glared at him, upset that he had shown Sasuke up, and Sasuke was upset that he had refused to train him again, considering asking the council to make him do it. Naruto's power allowed him to do anything. "Begin." Kakashi spoke, and all 3 genin disappeared. That being said, 2 of them were still present, one had completely disappeared. As in he couldn't be sensed at all. This was surprising for Kakashi, a seasoned Junin who was also a retired Anbu captain. Naruto glanced at the sensei from his position, which was hanging from his feet on a branch directly above Kakashi. He'd hidden his presence, let go of some of his power and created a powerful illusion that hid him from sight completely. No one could sense him no matter how hard they tried, because he wasn't using chakra at all. His feet were hooked over the branch, which was strong enough to support him, but also small enough to hang from. He also sealed his chakra into the pendant, and took out the abilities he gained from his true form, which, he found out from Hinata accidentally once, were undetectable by ninja who have never sensed them before. Kakashi was no exception. Sasuke took the next opportunity he could to release his grand fireball jutsu, which surprised Kakashi a bit, but it wasn't enough, and the boy ran again. Sakura was about as useful at this point as a rotting log. She hadn't done anything, and got trapped in a genjutsu, then found her love interest buried up to his neck, and she did the only thing that seemed remotely logical. She passed out foaming at the mouth. Naruto scoffed. This was the team he was placed on. He was lucky he got the other team as well. Finally, time had passed and the timer sounded. Sasuke was soon tied to a stump, while Sakura sat not far from him. Kakashi then said something about looking for Naruto, and disappeared. With a sigh, Naruto dropped down from his perch with no sound and made his way back to the start. Releasing his illusion and reversing the seal, he allowed himself to be sensed again. "What on earth did you think? How could you just leave us when this was about working as a team?" Sakura insisted. "Because in any case, neither of you desired my assistance. I told you it was about teamwork, but you didn't listen. Furthermore, isn't it correct, Anko, that I had another test to take?" The purple-haired special Junin leapt from the trees as Naruto grinned. "Gaki, damn you." She grinned and said, "I assumed you would have ignored me for the test." "Anko, why in the world are you here? My test might have been ruined by you." As he returned, Kakashi demanded. However, Naruto passed his test flawlessly, so I didn't. Kakashi's head cocked to the side, and she grinned, "I couldn't find him either." "Return? Did he ask? He plays for the 11th team. As well as yours, though yours is the top priority right now. He had to spend the entire time hiding from you and his teammates. But I didn't think he would leave me." She smirked and threw a kunai at him, and he let it land on his cheek. She snatched it from the stump and licked the blood off, looking shocked. It was the sweetest blood she had ever tasted. She tried to get more from him, but Kakashi cleared his throat after her. "Why in the world is that happening? Why is he on 2 when he has a genin team?" The Cyclops made the demand. "Pinky here truly has nowhere to go that will help her, and you were going to concentrate on training the Uchiha brat, which only you can do anyhow. Her strength is limited to defeating a first-year academy student, making her a hopeless fangirl. Most likely a coincidence. I will be training him, which is one of the reasons he is on my team. Additionally, it's a stealth assassination team, and he is among the most cunning ninja I've ever encountered, as you can see. More than the two of us." She gave him a manic smile and lunged at him once more, but Naruto jumped away and was about to counter when he noticed that she had stopped. Her strange expression indicated that she was thinking, and the idea of her thinking alarmed him more than her desire for his blood. "Well, they all pass because of the disruption to my team. I anticipate seeing you all again tomorrow at 7 o'clock, when we will conduct our first mission. My team is Naruto's top priority, Anko. You understand?" Kakashi insisted. "Roger that lazy ass." She smirked and turned away as a tick mark appeared on Kakashi's face. He will be talking to the Hokage about this. Naruto made the decision to continue training with Akane and wait for Hinata and Kiba to finish. When they did, he discovered that Hinata was much more adept at stealth than Kiba, which was not surprising given that the Inuzuka boy was one of the noisiest genin Konoha had ever had. They were then briefed on how they were supposed to improve, with Naruto being assigned to assist his teammates, and then released to return the following day for a D rank. After realizing that the majority of the tasks were simple labor-based, Naruto began working on his own, earning money. Anko grinned and led the group to the missions office, explaining, "We have our first mission, and I know all of us can do C rank. We have to get the D ranks out of the way first. We must catch Tora the cat." The task appeared simple, but the hardest part was actually carrying it out. The damn cat was too fast, and although Naruto could have easily caught it, he chose not to because he didn't want to reveal himself. Instead, he allowed Hinata, who was still kind at heart, to capture the terrified cat. 0.25 D rank missions later, for every team, Naruto sighed as he prepared for the day, knowing that he would blow up the missions office after one more fucking D mission. He had sent clones to complete many of the missions alone and had perhaps 70 missions under his belt without assistance, excluding the 50 he had completed with his teams. Kakashi had just completed them with another D rank when they were brought into the Hokage's office. "Thank you for your work. The pay will be given to each of your accounts." "Hey, old man. Would you mind giving us a C rank right away? We're all prepared for the upcoming D rank missions, and I've completed enough of them," Naruto sighed. "I wanted to speak with you about that. Team 7 is being sent to Wave as part of an escort mission. It's a basic C rank." The Hokage grinned and gestured for the client to be brought in. Naruto could tell right away that the man was drunk because he smelled of pipe tobacco and alcohol, his clothes were unkempt, and he appeared to be quite irritated. "You sent me this team, right? A cripple and a group of children?" Naruto laughed out loud at the accuracy of each of his statements. "One looks like he hasn't taken a shit in a while. Guess, one looks like she got into a fight with cotton candy. Ooh, that's so hard to figure out. And one looks moderately strong but like he is holding off on killing everyone here." This is Tazuna. He works in Wave as a bridge builder and requires escort to return to his homeland. In 3 hours, you depart. The Hokage suppressed a smirk as they left, and Naruto looked at Tazuna. Use that time to prepare. Even though we don't appear very impressive, we are trustworthy and have our own advantages. While he didn't want to read the man's mind for privacy reasons, Naruto knew that the mission wasn't properly ranked, and when it was mentioned that it would be a simple escort, the man visibly tensed. A hopeful look crossed the drunkard's face before it returned to a tired and grumpy one. We will protect you with our lives from whatever threat may come, he smirked. Whatever, kid. Naruto used the time to train more, knowing that it would help at some point, and he'd even got the concepts of the chakra chains down. He could produce something similar, just less binding at that point. A last option jutsu. Meeting the group at the gate, and leaving 2 hours later than planned, Naruto hung to the back of the pack of people. He wasn't a people person, no matter how well he acted as if he were. Tazuna was talking to Sakura, and Sasuke was brooding again. It wasn't until they passed a shit genjutsu with 2 chunin hidden inside that Naruto knew that his suspicion was true. The mission was misranked. Naruto replaced himself with a blood clone and hid off to the side, allowing the clone to be killed by the chunin. Kakashi did the same, and watched. However, when both Sasuke and Sakura were nearly overtaken, Naruto stepped in. He drew both of his swords and slashed through the opponents while they were distracted with relative ease. The swords caught Sasuke's attention, however he filed them away under his things.I.need.to. Kill. Itachi file. Naruto put them back into their rune on his arm, which he'd taken his gauntlet off to reach, and addressed Tazuna. Tell me, which rank is appropriate for this? He asked plainly. I couldn't afford to pay for a better ranking. The distressed civilian began to cry a little and muttered through his hands. An evil man named Gatu is controlling Wave, and he has stolen all of our money, and even paid mercenaries to kill me so that the bridge won't be completed. Naruto repeated, less sternly, what rank? This time, he was asking rather than demanding. The impoverished man said, it should be an A rank. Naruto nodded and made the decision to make another clone to keep watch over them while they traveled, causing it to transform into a bird and fly around. The demon brothers from Mist were those chunin. A team of a higher rank, not genin, should be assigned to this mission. Kakashi turned around and began to return to Konoha. Whatever happened to wanting to keep this man safe, Kakashi? Why are we giving in when we promised the Hokage that we would fulfill our duty? Naruto inquired of the Cyclops. I want to fight a strong person, even if that was the least of our threats. Sakura was the only one who heard Sasuke mutter, prove myself, and she began to smile. Indeed, Kakashi. We are capable of completing this mission, however, Kakashi would have to work on the attitudes for both of them. Naruto. Baka should go home and train some more, he isn't strong enough, she said, sticking her tongue out to the blonde ninja, who ignored her. I'll request a backup. Would that help you feel better? Knowing that Naruto was going to send for Anko, Kakashi nodded reluctantly. Naruto made a second shadow clone and, after quickly creating a henge with it, sent it off to Konoha. Naruto asked, thinking he could send for his own other team, which was stronger than most of the other genin teams and had a good deal of teamwork under their belt, much more than Team 7. All right, there's no more time to waste, let's go. Kakashi led, monitoring his genin and Tazuna, as well as the surrounding area. He felt the weight of responsibility on his chest. It was his first genin team, and if he couldn't protect them here, he would never accept another. Soon they were back onto the path, and had to take a boat across the water into Wave. The owner of the boat that Tazuna had them use to get across didn't want to use the engine, because then Gatu would know about the group. As they passed below the colossal bridge, and Naruto's respect for the now sober man grew exponentially. It took a lot of time to work on this, and not only did he want to finish, despite the obvious risk to his life, but he was determined to protect his village using that bridge. Naruto was helping row the boat when they arrived into the town quietly. Tazuna told them that he lived in a more remote area, hiding from the potential danger. They walked for another hour, and weren't more than an hour off from his home when Naruto threw a kunai into the bushes suddenly. A white rabbit leapt out shaking after being startled in such a way, yet it didn't run. Naruto took notice of such a fact immediately, and upon picking up the rabbit, he shouted for everyone to duck. Kakashi tackled Sasuke to the ground, and Tazuna took Sakura down, seeing as she did the opposite of ducking and thrust her big head into the air to look for a threat. They were almost too late. The large executioner's blade passed over their heads, taking the ends off of Sakura's hair off. Naruto had actually jumped over the blade, and watched carefully as the ninja who had thrown it dropped from the tree and stood on the blade as it was lodged into a tree. Sakura and Sasuke were both brought to their knees by the man's solemn voice. "All right. I only want the bridge builder. You all can go home before I kill you." Kakashi gritted his teeth and lifted his forehead protector, realizing that he would need his Sharingan to keep him alive during this battle. Naruto watched intently, taking a protective stance in front of Tazuna while holding the rabbit, realizing that the small animal was meant to serve as a target substation, assisting the man in front of them in approaching. "To what delight do I owe your acquaintance, copycat ninja? To be up against such a formidable foe." Sakura and Sasuke both trembled in terror as the man sneered at them. The man with the wrappings over his mouth said with what appeared to be a smile. "Mochi Zabuza. A missing Ninkiri. Gato hired you," Kakashi said, glaring at the man with the gray skin. Sasuke was about to commit suicide when Kakashi abruptly spoke to him. Sakura panicked as a dense fog rolled in over the small group. "I will not allow a comrade to die, and especially not my cute little students," he said with an eye smile that still frightened Naruto no matter how many times he saw it. "There are 8 options available: brain, spine, lungs, liver, kidneys, heart, carotid, and jugular. First, where should I go?" Zabuza's voice rang through the mist, bouncing off of trees and creating a haunting effect. Naruto had seized the moment of distraction from his team and hid his presence in a tree nearby. That being said, he was fully prepared to attack if any of his team were close to dying. He wasn't that heartless yet, although he was sure that over time that would change. Konoha has become a cesspool of rotten people, and the villagers have taken to beating him more and more. Or trying to if they could catch him. Now that he was a ninja, no one could really stop him from doing what he wanted, other than the Hokage, and even then, the old man was doing a piss-poor job of regulating him and his team. The man also tried to tell him to stop feeding off of the civilians. Well, good fucking luck with that. He needed blood and chakra. Less blood would have to do. He'd never tried blood with chakra, but it seemed as if it would be tasty. Naruto sat and watched, waiting for the right time to strike. He took his gauntlets off soundlessly, and used the runes on his arm to summon a pair of bladed fans connected by a chain. It wasn't his favorite weapon, that behind his pair of swords, but he enjoyed this one nonetheless. The way the chain was set up, it had metal spikes coming out from it, so even if the blades pass by an enemy when thrown, they are still likely to be hit by the chain. A.N. Yes, I was thinking Princess Katana from Mortal Kombat, which I do not own. And before anyone comments on how that wouldn't work with physics, that would make chakra not apply to physics either, so hush. Naruto aimed it carefully, letting it pass harmlessly over the heads of the other genin, and through the mist, effectively clearing it, then pulled it back using a small chakra thread he'd placed on the chain. He then detached one of the fans, and upon sealing the chain and other fan carefully and quickly, Naruto went in and took out the water clone that Zabuza had placed between Sakura, Sasuke, and Tazuna. This jolted the other genin out of their shocked states, as they realized that they were that close to dying. "Are you not a little tough?" Zabuza laughed. "I'm surprised that you knew it was a clone." Kakashi, who hadn't yet noticed the runes on Naruto's arms, was also taken aback by his student and was curious about the location of the scroll that contained his weapons. Naruto began to say in the tree, "I may not be a Uchiha with their Sharingan, but I know the difference between clones. Because I use them myself," he concluded from behind the missing ninja, having made a clone and sent it to assist. Zabuza had more experience than Naruto, but he fought hard and was aware of some of the older man's weaknesses. It wasn't until Kakashi was trapped in a large bubble of water that Naruto realized he needed to get serious or risk his sensei's life. He made a blood clone, hiding back into the trees, but this clone would be fighting for him while he solved another puzzle. Who were the ninja masking their chakra about 50 meters away? He sought to find out, instructing his clone to use whatever methods were necessary to fight Zabuza, aside from releasing the seals. The clone nodded, and Naruto leapt away without a word. In the tree, he discovered a girl wearing a hunter ninja's mask from Kiri, and he watched the fight closely. After sneaking up on her, Naruto said, "You know, if you wanted to sell us that you were a hunter, you should have brought more allies to dress the same." He dropped a senbon he had caught with his hand and raised his hands in the universal sign of peace. "I'm not here to fight you, but I will if you try to harm me once more." The girl, who had dark brown eyes and black hair tied up in a bun, sighed and took off the mask. "I'm here to ask you who hired you." "Gato. Don't tell Zabuza Sama that I don't like this type of work, but we are his hired protection and dirty work. I am his tool, so I have to do whatever he asks of me. That is my life's purpose," she said firmly, and Naruto nodded. "I just wanted to let you know that Gato is a shady jerk who dislikes paying his hired mercs. After the job is finished, he'll probably have you killed." Naruto shrugged, drawing the girl's attention. Who are you? How are you aware of this? She insisted. Naruto Uzumaki is who I am. We asked for backup, so I sent a clone back to our village, where I conducted research on Gadu of Gadu Company. After his mercenaries assist him, he has them killed and resumes his reign of terror without ever paying them. Have you visited the town? It's a mess. The people lack the funds to live in a better environment and can hardly afford to eat. I promised to keep them safe. But, Hunter.san, you haven't yet told me your name. He grinned at her. My name is Haku. Zabuza found me on the streets and raised me. I am the last of the Yuki clan and I am from Kiri. My father killed my mother because she was in possession of a Kekai Genkai, which is the same weapon I use to release ice. I was discovered and taken in by Zabuza. He has become my 2.san in my eyes. He won't realize that, though, because as long as I can help him, I have a purpose, she said, with a faint smile on her face. Naruto looked back at the nearby skirmish, which appeared to be under control by Kakashi, so the clone was employing a guerrilla tactic, advancing when needed and then withdrawing. How about this? I'll meet you after you're gone. You can take Zabuza, render him temporarily incapacitated, freeze him, put him in a death. Like state, or do anything else you want. My sensei, who is a complete moron, believes that I am fighting alongside him against Zabuza. I'll come after you. I have a proposition for you, he said, nodding to her before resuming the fight and sending the smokeless clone into hiding with the directive to follow the team when the battle was over. Naruto, who had learned a few things from Hinata over the years, threw another barrage of punches and strategically placed palm strikes before two senbon struck Zabuza on the side of the neck, and Haku descended from the tree after the attack. I appreciate you diverting his attention long enough for me to follow him. As Haku was taking out the senbon, Naruto followed his new ally and reached the tree above them. If you will pardon me, I must get rid of the body. Kakashi jumped back, apparently not fully believing them, but gathered his 2 genin plus 1 blood clone and ushered them away with Tazuna. My goodness, did you really need to be so harsh? The man sat up and swore, fuck that hurt. They wouldn't have believed me if I hadn't done it that way. Additionally, we have inside assistance. Haku said softly as she tried to nurse her surrogate father's wounds, but he was not amenable to that. Inside assistance? What sort of nonsense are you saying? He mumbled, massaging his head, and although he was aware that he was simply upset about losing, Haku was merely attempting to assist. Naruto leapt from the tree and said, she is right, you know. Zabuza reached for his sword, but he waited since Haku hadn't moved. You, what are you doing? The man with the gray skin snarled. I'd like to hire both of you. Given that Gadu isn't going to keep your promise, it might be a waste for 2 powerful ninja to be killed by him. Naruto shrugged. For what purpose do you want to hire us? She wasn't informed of this part of the agreement, so Haku inquired. I want the 2 of you to assist me later. I'll notify you when the time comes, but for now, know that I can give you twice as much as Gadu. That is, once I convince him to give me a piece of his wealth. Naruto grinned. How in hell are you going to accomplish that? I'll comply with your wishes if you're a kid. Zabuza laughed. Hell, I'll even go with Konoha until you figure it out. He didn't like being on the run all the time, and this kid was fascinating much more so than his sensei, who didn't seem to care. Fantastic. I have to go back to my team now, however, just to let you know, we still plan to fight you on the bridge in a week. Just stay alive and don't try to kill anyone. After that, I'll get your pay. Naruto shook hands with both ninja, and they both saw how cold he was. Returning to the team, the sun was setting peacefully, but Naruto knew that he had to do some scouting, so he removed the pendant and slipped into the night quietly. Naruto sighed as he sat on the roof. He'd been reprimanded by Kakashi for joining the fight, and how he could have jeopardized everything. It was bullshit. Haru, Enko, Kiba, and Hinata arrived shortly after Naruto with his clone, and after a nice kiss with Hinata that made Sasuke and Sakura huffing, he told her that he needed some alone time. Kakashi was down for a while, suffering from chakra exhaustion, having used the Sharingan throughout the fight. The little brat Inari stormed through, saying something about stupid ninja and heroes being idiots. Naruto grinned as he stalked toward Gadu's base, which was set up in the forest and, despite its appearance as a children's treehouse, was anything but enjoyable. He huffed and pulled his hair over his shoulder, which had grown to his waist and was so long that he could pull it back, but he didn't have the means to do so at the moment. He focused on the interior of the building, listening to the voices and observing the movements of the various bodies. One was bedridden, most likely Zabuza. Another was seated by the bed, which was Haku, and a third stood between 2 taller men, which had to be Gadu. The Kiri ninja appear to be rather pitiful, don't they? Gadu, a short, elderly man with thinning white hair on top, grinned and walked over to Zabuza, who was about to grab him when Haku grabbed his wrist and broke it in her hands. To have returned to me, your master, after being defeated. She growled, don't you dare touch Zabuza-san with your filthy hands. Naruto smirked and made the decision to enter the room where the groups were, using his own flicker. From the shadows, he declared, I'm sure you have the wrong definition of pathetic Gadu. The two bodyguards immediately swung their swords at him. Have you never trained your dogs to remain seated? Everyone in the room, including the swordsman, was taken aback when Naruto asked, lifting his arms above his head and taking the blades on his forearms. This was the first time their swords had ever been stopped, much less by an arm. What on earth are you? How on earth did you enter here? Gatu yelled, suddenly in rage. The man who has embezzled money from so many people that it's a wonder he's still alive deserves the same question from me. With hardly a glance at the short man, Naruto replied, let's just say I'm a passing shadow. Gatu's swordsman ordered the newcomer to be killed after a large vein appeared on his forehead, but Naruto ducked their blows, used a moment of distraction to knock one out, and grabbed the other by the neck. Now, since I haven't eaten in a while, I believe you'll be a good fit. He gave him a manic smile, flashing his white fangs, and added some chakra to make his eyes glow. The man started to perspire a lot and tried to fight out of Naruto's grasp, but it didn't work, so he pulled him close and bit down on his neck, tasting the sweet blood as it passed over his tongue. Just his type, as it turned out. He finished quickly so that his audience wouldn't have to wait. Haku had turned a subtle shade of green, and Zabuza was in awe. He had heard about demons that fed on human blood, but he had never seen one, and he didn't think they existed. Please complete this for me. I'll spare you if you deposit all of your money into the account using this number. Gatu nodded and hurried out of the room before any more bodily fluids or solids, for that matera could be spilled. Naruto yelled at the man and strode toward him, placing a small piece of paper in the front pocket of his suit. If you don't by the end of the week, then I shall kill you myself. Who are you, really? Zabuza inquired. He shrugged, maintaining the alias, and said, I am called many things. Alistair is the name that seems to have stuck. Isn't that not an elemental nation's name? Still green, Haku inquired. No, it's not my real name either. It's time to get down to business. I'm here to discuss the boy Naruto with you, Alistair said. How about him? Is our agreement off? Zabuza insisted. I am only here to discuss him with you, hardly. He is a young man who experienced the same suffering as Haku. He has been mistreated in his own village due to his Jinchuriki status, and he has the Kyuubi sealed inside of him. He was severely beaten until he was 7 years old, and every week he came dangerously close to death. He is motivated to become strong in order to shield himself and the people he loves from the prejudice of the village, and I wanted you to know this. He even wants to go. Why do you say this to us? Before Zabuza could respond with unrelated details, Haku inquired. First, because he will do whatever it takes to keep a promise. He is going to fulfill his promise to protect the builder. The kid had some serious connections. 2. If either of you try to stab him in the back, or to nullify your little deal, I will take care of you personally. He let a low growl rumble in his throat to show he was serious. Both ninja moved away subtly in slight fear, with Zabuza still in awe and Haku fearing for her master's mind and his plans. Only after Naruto had stopped growling and had begun to move back into the shadows did either ninja relax. Naruto left the building at that point, returning through the forest to where Dazuna's residence was, and he saw that Inari was sitting outside on the pier that was on the house. After he sealed himself, he approached gently, knowing the boy had a bad day. May I? The boy shrugged as if he didn't care, and Naruto, who had put the seal back on, gestured beside him. What made you believe that none of us had suffered? In an effort to get right to the point, Naruto asked. Are you familiar with the experience of losing a loved one? To see them battle and lose their lives to keep you safe? How does that feel to you? Inari sobbed, desperately suppressing the tears that threatened to spill out of her eyes. No, however, that does not imply that I am unaware of suffering. Here, I can speak for a few others as well. Because Anko used to be an apprentice of one of our worst enemies, our village has treated her like a piece of garbage. Even though I dislike him, Sasuke saw his brother massacre his entire clan and family before abandoning him. All of Hinata's family members have made fun of her, with the exception of her younger sister, who did nothing to stop it until recently. Haru was discovered raped, drugged, and tied to a tree. I have a personal friend who found her. Naruto sighed, thinking that the boy had indeed heard everything he needed to, but it turned out that he still maintained his ignorance. I would tell you my story, but I think you've heard enough. It doesn't matter if they have suffered. It's you who is speaking to me as if you were aware. Never assume you know who I am. Don't assume you understand how I feel. As Inari stood up to depart, he yelled, but Naruto stopped him and used a few of his chakra chains. "You'll take a seat," Naruto said. Now, it wasn't a question, and he wasn't letting Inari get up. At last, the boy obeyed, and they were seated next to each other once more. "I have never loved anyone until very recently, so I have no idea what it's like to lose a loved one. The villagers used me as a scapegoat because I was an orphan and their heads were pushed up their asses too much. Every day, I was beaten to within inches of my life. They would occasionally allow me to recover again in order to beat me until I was nearly dead. I didn't become strong enough to defend myself until 3 years ago, when my current master arrived. I understand what it's like to suffer, and I've found love in friends and companionship. However, that doesn't mean I give in to the pressure to let go of my life. As evidenced by my disappearance earlier this evening, I do not readily concede defeat. In order to get you all back on your feet, I went to Gadu's hideout and used my skills to scare him into giving me his money, which I will use for this village if necessary. Avoiding maturing and learning isn't being strong, Inari." Naruto got up, brushed his knees off, and left the young boy to think once more. "You are weak now because you have fallen prey to your fear of struggle. You need to accept the past, and use it to help your future." That night, Naruto watched over the house from the roof, knowing about everyone's dreams, Sasuke's nightmares, Hinata's dreams of him, and other thoughts she was having. When people dream, their thoughts are projected, creating scenes that any skilled mind reader can read. Kakashi was only thinking about how he could help Sasuke become a better ninja. Naruto could see why he wanted to help the boy get revenge on his clan, but he needed to improve himself before he could try anything. Already on a very perilous path, Kakashi was only contributing to Sasuke's downward trajectory. Given that dango is one of her favorite things, it should come as no surprise that Anko was dreaming about it. Inari was sitting on the couch with a resolute expression on his face when Naruto leapt from the roof and entered the house that morning. As soon as he saw Naruto, he exclaimed, "Naruto.ni, can you train me?" Naruto knew he had reached the younger boy because of the light in his eyes. He nodded and smiled softly. Naruto patted his head and went upstairs to where Hinata was sleeping peacefully, saying, "After all this with Gadu is over." He took a seat beside her and combed through her hair. She nuzzled her head deeper into his hand while grinning in her slumber. He chuckled and carried on with his little gesture until Hinata opened her eyes. Mumbling, "G morning," she smiled at him and rested her head in his lap, but Naruto knew from experience that she wasn't a big morning person. Hinata rested her head on his thighs and said, "I could get used to these wake-up calls. They're very nice." As she grew more conscious of her surroundings, he kept running his hands through her hair. She got up and changed, preparing for their full day. "Training day, huh? Kakashi is down for the count, right? So we are training with Anko." "Apparently. I'm kind of nervous for the two lazy bums on my team. For them, they haven't ever done a tree walking exercise, or the water walking, or even jutsus. It's all been team building. The only training I've gotten was with you guys, and don't get me wrong, it's been a great amount of training so far, but those two can't keep up, and would slow us down," sighed Naruto. After spending the entire night in the same clothes from yesterday, he also changed. He took off both his shirt and his black pants and changed into something a bit more weatherproof. While Konoha was also a warm country, it was much less humid due to the lack of water surrounding it, whereas Wave was a very humid country. Naruto put on black, green, and gray cargo pants and a tight muscle shirt that resembled spandex. His boots were put on top of his wrappings, which reached the bottom of his knees. The seals and runes were obscured by his gauntlets, and his pendant was prominently visible around his neck. Since her head could only reach that height, Hinata placed it between his shoulder blades and gave him a back hug. Although both teenagers were only 13 and experiencing their biggest growth spurt to date, she was still developing rapidly. Even though he was among the tallest in the academy by the previous year, he was rapidly demonstrating that he would grow to be a tall man after graduating and training. He descended the stairs once more and trailed Anko, Haru, and the other genin to a wooded clearing nearby. Anko questioned, "All right brats, what have you learned?" Naruto butted in before Sakura or Sasuke could say anything about how they had learned a lot from Kakashi and how Naruto had learned nothing. He then walked to the closest tree, climbed its trunk, and sat on one of its branches, saying, "Team building." The two genin who were left behind became agitated when they discovered that everyone else there was able to do that except for them. Sasuke was upset that he wasn't the first to learn it, but neither would acknowledge that it bothered them. In order to kill Itachi, he was an avenger and deserved all that the village had to offer. With a sigh, Naruto leapt from his position. He said, "I'm going to go to the bridge with Tazuna to watch over him." Wanting to avoid being stranded helping the Avenger and the Pink Banshee, he leapt off. Hinata got up to offer her assistance as well, but Haru stopped her in her tracks. Moving toward the bridge, Naruto temporarily removed the barrier separating him and Akane so they could speak. He told her to be nicer while she warmed up to him. Even though they continued to call each other derogatory names like dumb furball, dumb non-human, and so forth, it was all in good humor, and he was beginning to warm up to her. In an effort to ensure that his bridge would be constructed before Gato could further harm his town, Tazuna was working harder than ever. After a minor incident, one of Tazuna's men resigned, along with a few of his friends, declaring they would no longer be working. With a sigh, Naruto made clones, and they began to continue where the other men had left off. After glancing at him, Tazuna asked, "Why are you helping, boy?" Naruto glared at the men who were leaving, saying, "Any man who is not willing to lay down his life for his family and his town is not worth being a part of this bridge." Despite the embarrassed expressions on their faces, none of them planned to pass away while they still had families to support. After a day's work, Tazuna nodded, and Gato was nowhere to be seen. Naruto knew that he would not back down despite being threatened and having been weakened by his own greed. He and his team would be prepared for the fight when the time came. Because Naruto knew that hunting the villagers was a terrible idea and that it was best for him to keep a low profile while in wave, he spent the nights hunting animals in the forest. He made the decision to work hard to get even stronger by doing additional training with Akane one of the nights. Akane paused abruptly in the middle of a spar and listened for a while. She swiftly gave the order, "There is a visitor on the outside. Wake up Gaki," and vanished into her seal once more. When Naruto emerged from his dream training, he saw a hand reaching for him. He opened his eyes and grasped the attached wrist. He grinned at her and said, "It's not nice to disturb a sleeping ninja, Haku-chan." She sighed and withdrew her hand. Knowing full well that she wasn't there for a friendly visit, Naruto asked, "What have you come here to tell me?" She picked some herbs from the ground close to Naruto and said, "I came to tell you that Gato has planned the attack for 3 days from now. He plans to take out everyone, including Zabuza, Sama and I at the bridge." He grinned at her, and she gave him a deadpan look. "I won't let that happen. You have a promise to keep, right? It's the best I can do to help you keep it." He gave a little laugh. He questioned her, "You really care for Zabuza, don't you? He is a father to me. Even if he doesn't see it, he raised me, taking me in and caring for me. He has his own agenda, and while he comes off as a bit of an asshole, he really is a good guy, if not a bit soft on the inside." She chuckled as she pulled more herbs. Naruto nodded, sharing Tenek's sentiments. Then he got up and began to laugh, saying, "I should get back to my team. Kami knows what they've gotten into without me." As the tall boy left, Haku bowed and observed. Her attention was captivated by something about him. She could readily admit that he was attractive, and it was easy to see. Despite the fact that the Alistair guy had claimed to have suffered, he was kind. Haku grinned as he considered how similar he was to her. He was also adorable. Even though he may have once found the whisker lines on his cheeks frightening, they only gave his otherwise mature his face a boyish touch. She let out a sigh as she considered how this young child might have had a greater impact on her life than Zabuza. When Naruto returned to Tazuna's house, he found Tsunami preparing breakfast in the kitchen while Inari, the elderly man, Kakashi, and Anko were seated around the table. Even though Naruto himself never had to sleep, it was still early, and when he entered the room, everyone's heads turned. Anko smirked and said, "Why do you insist on sleeping outside? What is wrong with the house?" With a shrug, Naruto took a seat at the table. As he grabbed an apple from the table and let his teeth grow and pierce the thin skin, he said, "I like the outdoors. Plus if I get too used to sleeping in a house, how will it be on a mission where I can't have that luxury?" Even though he did it subtly, Inari noticed that he was simply holding the apple in his mouth. When Naruto got his teeth in the apple, the boy was on him. He was intelligent, if not a little spacey when he didn't care about something. "Hey, you have fangs," he said with a smile, trying to see Naruto's mouth from his seat. After he finished biting the fruit, Naruto sighed and opened his mouth to show Inari. As the boy sagged in his chair, he laughed and said, "No fangs, kiddo." Kakashi, however, did not miss this change and was curious as to what the boy had observed in Naruto's mouth. The reason everyone gathered at the table that morning was because Kakashi had recovered enough to assist with the genin's training. Figuring something along those lines, Naruto shrugged and started to leave the room, but Anko stopped him. "Naruto, I want you to stay here while I talk to this fucker," she exclaimed, her smile insane and her teeth gritted. As she spoke, Naruto could practically feel the anger radiating from her body. Aware of what was about to happen, the Cyclops ninja sank back into his chair. "Why haven't you trained your genin team? What the hell? I had to teach the two how to use the tree walking exercise the other day, something I thought you'd already taught them. Is there something wrong? Do you need me to take over their training until you're competent enough? Hitaki? She growled at him. The truth was closer to the truth than he had realized. They don't really get along? I thought I'd get them to like each other before I tried to make them fight together, he said. Sasuke was constantly envious of Naruto's strength and intelligence. That Uchiha, superior to some clanless brat who was unaware of his own limitations, was something he detested. Sakura, on the other hand, got off to a bad start with Naruto, directing all of her attention and kind words toward the sulky stick-up-her-ass rather than toward her own survival or training. Another problem is that, even if Naruto offered to help, neither of the pig-headed teenagers would accept it. Despite the fact that he was clearly stronger than both of them, they still made an effort to minimize him. The fact that his student, who had been assigned exclusively to him, was being trained by a rookie who wasn't even an expert in genin teams and a newcomer to the village who was rescued by an odd man with long red hair infuriated Kakashi even more. In his opinion, this team was destined for failure. Kakashi tried to respond, but Naruto snorted back, and what of Kiba? A powerhouse whose strongest point was in tracking. How is this stealth and assassination squad going to help him? And what was the last thing you heard from the former loudmouth? Part of his training is being as silent as possible. I've got extremely sensitive hearing, and it's a miracle none of you have realized that he is awake and stomping to the window right now. Oh, there he goes out the window into the forest. Naruto laughed. When Kakashi looked out the kitchen window and saw the young teen running off with his white puppy, he thought it was complete bullshit. Given that he was losing, he swallowed back another comment. Inari continued to sit next to his grandfather, who was clearly not listening, and said, "You seem to be the sensei with the least qualifications here." He only cared about finishing his bridge and avoiding death. It wasn't his fight. Knowing that Anko and Kakashi needed to talk and that more information would be revealed as soon as he left, Naruto sighed and turned to leave. In any case, he was able to hear them. When he finally made it upstairs, Hinata was already awake, and although he didn't often sleep with her, she could still count on him to be there first thing in the morning. He sat down on the bed beside her and grinned at her, asking, "And how is my Hina?" "I'm doing," but she appeared almost anxious. "Are we sure we can fight off these adversaries? I mean, 2 missing nin and a whole armada of mercenaries. We just became ninja. How is it that we got stuck with this job?" She responded with disbelief. "Because of poverty and desperation. These people needed help and we responded to the call blindly. It was my idea to send for you guys anyway, knowing that we would be thrown into such intense fighting and almost inevitable conflict. I would have a correction, should have, thought through this further. On the flip side, the team that was sent was not capable, and I knew that this team was stronger." Naruto sighed as he wrapped his arms around. He had a lot to tell her, but he was unable to do so at this time. Before he revealed his secrets to her, she needed to mature and become even more receptive. He wished that she would accept him for who he was. He was growing weary of being completely hidden and confined. He yearned for freedom and his body yearned for a bigger release. Whether it was accepted or not, he was already making plans for the future. He was certain of his course of action. It appeared that he would be taken advantage of in his lifetime. For a variety of reasons besides his own skills. For a moment, Naruto averted his gaze in contemplation. Akane simply sighed at him after he opened up to her. She shrugged her shoulders and said, "You know that she will accept you for you. It's hard not to with a face like yours." For a moment, Naruto entered his head to examine her. She put her hand over her mouth and said, "What? I can't tell my Otudo he's attractive?" He asked her, a little taken aback that they had become so close over the years. "You just called me little brother. Do you mean that?" She smiled slightly and gave a subtle nod. She laughed and said, "You grew on me, kid." Naruto nodded and shut down once more, saying, "Go, your girl is starting to get moving." It took almost no time to get ready, and the genin were soon back in the clearing where they met each day for training. The genin waited for a training day after sending a clone after Kiba, who met them at the house. Anko was nowhere to be seen, but Haru and Kakashi were in the clearing. Sakura and Sasuke trailed behind Naruto as he walked alongside Hinata and Kiba. They were still sleeping, and since it was still early, Kakashi had to wake them both up. Both of them appeared irritated at being awakened and at the fact that the other 3 genin were better prepared than they were. "Alright, today is going to be focused on sparring on the water. Since some of you just learned how to water walk, you will start in the shallow end, and for those of you who are more experienced, head to the middle of the river. You will be forced to spar with each other, while maintaining perfect chakra control," Haru stated, seemingly exhausted from her conversation about Kakashi with Anko. With a shrug, Naruto and Hinata strolled to the center of the water. Shortly after, Kiba joined, and the fight turned into a three-way fight. Sakura and Sasuke got into a heated argument as Sasuke tried to leave the sparring. Hinata sighed and halted at last. She looked at Naruto, who was a little annoyed that he had been chosen to fight Sasuke, and said, "Sakura, I will spar with you. Naruto, go spar with the dickhead." He stepped over to the shallow end with Sasuke and adopted a lazy stance after she gave him a look that told him he wouldn't hear the end of it if he didn't. Sasuke yelled, "You better be ready to drown Dobi because that's how badly I'm going to beat your ass," and hurled himself at the phony teenager who was yawning. Naruto only had to sidestep to send the enraged boy into the water. He splashed to the bottom of the shallow river, forgetting to send chakra to meet the surface. As Haru watched the alienated genin try to battle the more experienced fighter, a tiny snort escaped her nose. Naruto ducked and dodged most of his attacks, even swatting some away as though they had no purpose, proving that all of his preparation had been in vain. As Kiba and Akamaru battled one another while transforming into beast men, this went on. Haru had started teaching them both more fighting skills that were less ostentatious and could incorporate jutsus and Inuzuka fighting styles. A horrified Kakashi observed Naruto's treatment of Sasuke. Kakashi was taking Sasuke under his wing because he understood what it was like to lose loved ones, such as his father and sensei, and Naruto didn't know what it was like to lose a clan. Under the dog mask, Kakashi was one of the Anbu assigned to protect Naruto during his early years. Others included Cat, Crow, and even some of ANBU's more senior forces that Danzo did not command. Kakashi witnessed the child being beaten and nearly killed more times than he could count. He had let it happen because he thought it would help the villagers deal with their anger, but the more Naruto grew, which seemed to happen frequently, the more irate they became. He was removed from observation and assigned to a different duty in the village after receiving numerous reprimands for failing to properly care for young Naruto. All information about Naruto was erased after he left because the other Anbu watched him until he was hired as an apprentice by the odd man who had come into the village. Sasuke, wet and exhausted, decided he had had enough of Naruto dominating him. Used his fireball jutsu to attempt a cheap shot that not only missed but was aimed directly at a startled Sakura. In order to prevent the irate girl from simply landing on top of the water, Hinata, who was the closest at the time, tackled her into the water. At that moment, Haru approached the boy with a look of rage on her face and did something that no one had ever witnessed her do before. She knocked the boy unconscious by slapping him across the face and hitting the back of his neck, just below the base of his skull. She then threw the boy at Naruto, who reluctantly caught him before extinguishing the resulting fire with a water dragon jutsu devoid of its hand signs. Kakashi was about to speak up after being horrified by her lack of consideration for his pupil, but she stopped him with a single glance. She appeared to have a tattoo because her eyes had turned blue instead of green and her face was covered in wave-like patterns. She had used her blood limit, Naruto realized, for the first time since they had first met. "Kakashi, how could you have let this little bastard's attitude fall so far? You have allowed him to think that he is better than every other genin that we have in Konoha, and it doesn't stop there." By a small twitch of his finger training, help and other things are given to him as if he were royalty. This has not helped him to believe that maybe some people are stronger than him. So his brother killed the clan, big deal. He was put so high on a pedestal that avenging the clan isn't what he wants to do anymore. He is dead set on killing his brother, for his own selfish power-hungry needs. Meanwhile, you are the Junin instructor to a 3-man genin team, meaning that you have 2 other children to train. Your neglect for Naruto is evident, hence why we took him onto our team, and you are lucky he is not some happy-go-lucky idiot in a jumpsuit who didn't know any better. You have not trained him, you've conditioned him to hate you. To despise you. And don't even get me started on the pink-haired banshee whose only asset is the low chakra she has. The control over it is phenomenal. I am sending a letter back to the Hokage, and she is being brought onto our team. No buts, not take backsies. If you want to train the Uchiha, fine, but don't hinder everyone else from trying to survive. She glared at the Junin, who was very close to shitting his pants. He came to the realization that his entire team was failing, and the Uchiha wasn't solely to blame. Due to his partiality, it was his. Sakura started to object, but Hinata stopped her with a glance. Naruto, go join Anko at the bridge. Hinata, work with Sakura on her chakra, if anything, give her chakra rings. I'll handle everything else. Haru exhaled. As everyone stalked off to do their tasks, Naruto added a number of clones to help with the construction. Tazuna had come to regard the blonde boy as a grandson, much like Inari, and his admiration for him had grown since the start of the journey. Naruto was thinking for himself. Sakura was a closer friend than Hinata and one of the sweetest girls he had ever met when he was younger. After a while, she stopped showing up and began to change whenever he was around. He had a feeling that she was thinking more than they were aware of. Until they returned to the village and were not concerned about renegade ninjas, this would have to wait. Given that Inoichi, the clan head, was a member of the Konoha interrogation unit, he considered asking the Yamanaka family, but he believed that whatever was going through her mind would be too much for the older man to handle. Naruto was also put in a difficult situation by this. In most situations, you are the truest version of yourself in your mind. Naruto was no exception, as he was completely free and unprotected from the thoughts of those who genuinely thought he was a demon, which was not far away. Though the thoughts wouldn't harm him, they do reflect what might occur in the village if his secret were to be revealed. The place was no longer for him, and he had already planned to leave. He wanted to know if Hinata could forgive him for years of deceiving her and trust him enough. In the hopes of becoming a chunin before then, he had intended to leave the village at the end of this year. Since the team would be the only ones present on a mission rather than the guards or Anbua, he would find it simpler to defect. From admiration as a child to respectful distaste, Naruto's view of the Hokage had undergone a significant transformation. Even though the villagers knew no real way to kill him, they tried their best, and he detested the fact that the old man had let him come dangerously close to death several times when he was younger. He nearly missed the glint of light from the trees on the ground close to the water's edge because he was so absorbed in his thoughts. Following the light, which he realized was Morse code for, "Come here," he replaced himself with a blood clone. Haku was standing between a few trees when he arrived at the bushes. Haku nodded, as if panting. "You called me in the daylight, something happened?" Naruto understood that he would have to enter her head after realizing that she was unable to speak for some reason. Then it occurred to him that this was a lot like the scenario he had been considering with Sakura earlier. "Haku, I'm going to show you something that not many people know about. Before you question me, I will need to explain. I am going to enter your mind. What you see will be real and I want you to trust me." "All right," he asked and received a quick nod of approval. With a nod, Naruto released his mind. Reading powers from their seal. Even Naruto was getting distracted by the girl's racing thoughts. Naruto entered her mindscape when the image flashing ceased. Though it was more akin to an alley with dirt and grime everywhere, the idea behind hers was very similar to Naruto's before he changed it for Akane. Haku was huddled beside a dumpster when he turned a corner. Haku looked up and said, "This is where Zabuza Otou.san found me years ago, next to a dumpster like this." Gazing at Naruto, she let out a gasp. Haku sighed and used her hand to change the scene to a small restaurant with a table and 2 chairs open. "This is what I needed you to trust me about. The man who visited you and Zabuza at Gadu's hideout was me. This is my true form. I am the demon. I am not as cold and heartless as I know I came off then, but I needed to know that you were both true to your words. Gadu has received help from an outside man, one like you. He didn't have red hair though. He turned Gadu into a Kaiketsuki. We couldn't do anything so we fled sooner, but not before a silencing seal was placed on me. I knew I could find you at the bridge so I set out to tell you what happened. This man was strong. His name was Marcellus. He had blonde hair, purple eyes, and he is very intimidating." She slightly shook her head, clearly frightened by the Tannic might know the man who was hired, Naruto thought, and he mentally noted that he should send for him when he had the opportunity. "I am going to release your seal now, and I need to send for other help as well. I promise that we will fix this issue, you will be safe." He disappeared from her thoughts. Haku was fortunate to be working with a master of Fuinjutsu, who was able to completely remove the seal in a few minutes in addition to releasing it. Then he called forth the messenger Chiba, one of the tiger summons. He quickly got the cub's attention by saying, "I need you to take this message to Tannic. Immediately. A man named Marcellus is here and threatening the lives of all of those involved in the mission. Get back to me with his response as soon as you can." As she waited for the messages to return, Haku could only observe the boy in front of her pacing back and forth. A moment later, the cub reappeared, looking shocked and frightened. The cub politely addressed his other contractor, saying, "Sir Tannic replied that he would be here within the hour, and that he expected you to fight with your life." With a nod, Naruto let Chiba go back to the summoning world. Haku exhaled a sigh of comfort. Knowing that he would have to return and inform his sensei of the change in plans, Naruto gave the order, "I'd suggest that you hide, and hide well. The sense of smell on an adult Kaiketsuki is very strong, and very good at tracking. If he doesn't care for you, he won't go after you, but do not give him an opportunity to get into your head." Haku turned away and fled after saying softly, "They plan on striking tomorrow, at dawn." Naruto nodded and followed suit, but he arrived at Tazuna's house in a matter of minutes due to his speed. He went in without knocking, recognized the people in the kitchen, and found Anko and Kakashi in addition to Haru right away. He didn't have time to cover all his skills, and he wasn't worried about the redness leaking over his normally well-kept blue eyes. We have a problem. I left a blood clone with Tazuna to take care of him. He is more than capable, we have bigger issues. Gato hired a new mercenary. According to my informant, he's not human. She said he was a Kaiketsuki. None of us here know how to deal with those sorts of creatures, however my trainer Tanik does. He's fought them on many occasions, and I sent for him to be brought here, on top of sending a message to the Hokage to take care of prepping a medical team to be sent here if it is deemed necessary. I will not tell you who my informant is, that defeats the purpose of informants, but I can tell you that Haku and Zabuza are no longer a threat to us. They were forced out of Gato's hideout and are currently on the run from them. I have made contact and hired them to fight for us as well if we deem it too difficult with the backup we have already supplied. This fight will be for our lives. I expect to not have to explain that to anyone, because we all have a job to do and we will complete it. Naruto growled at Kakashi, not caring about hiding some of his fangs yet. Knowing she had no space for humor, Anko nodded solemnly. Haru hoped Naruto could fight without disclosing his secret because he was worried about him. The ninja circle hesitated for a moment before a voice emerged from the darkness. Tanik emerged into view, saying, "Thank you for giving a brief introduction on what we need to do, Naruto." He kept his hood on, but he knew he would want to remove the light. Reflecting clothing because night was approaching. Unlike his trainee, he was unfamiliar with seals, and despite the unpleasant history, the clothing was given to him by a close relative who passed away. Kakashi was about to say that Sakura did know how to fight when he realized he had lost his student to the newer senseis because he hadn't actually trained her. The man we are going to be fighting is named Marcellus. He is around 300 years old. His age and his intelligence are two separate entities, however, because for his age, he is still very headstrong and doesn't always think through his actions. He also does not know how to properly fight. We can use that to our advantage because everyone here save the pink one are trained in battle. Naruto came up with a better plan than taking the real target to the bridge with them. We will make a clone of Tazuna, using my blood style and the clone manipulation. The actual man will be here at the house, under the protection of another blood clone. The group of you will fight at the bridge, backing up Tanik and I as needed, but knowing Gato he has mercenaries that he will bring. Zabuza gave me his word that he would fight with us, he swore it on his adopted daughter's life. The mission would fail if Tazuna were present and someone were killed in this battle. Naruto looked around and saw that his idea was supported by everyone. All that remained was to fill in the rest of the gaps and hope that Sasuke would cooperate with everyone else to guarantee their survival. Naruto would apply a multi-layered illusion to him if necessary. Using a pair of green-clad ninja and an apparently indestructible genjutsu, he had previously tested the theory that the Sharingan can see through genjutsus but not illusions made outside of normal chakra. Kiba and Hinata would concur without question. They were unaware that it was Sakura. Even though it was crucial, she was more likely to fight against her propensity to object to things that she didn't agree with. Then, in order to be stronger the following day, Naruto went hunting. Tanik accompanied him, and throughout the night, the sense of the hunt gave them more than enough lust for blood to repel their enemy. Naruto looked at his teacher after they were done and enjoying the moonlight while sitting on the roof. This was the first time his teacher had ever taken off his hood in front of him. Naruto looked at the other red-haired man and thought, "That's why I have red hair in my released form, isn't it?" The creator transfers his traits to his creations. Tanik gave a nod but said nothing. "If you can pass this test, Naruto, I have nothing else to teach you. After this mission, if we survive it, you will be more than capable to handle anything thrown at you. I fully expect you to live on without my aid, and while normally an older Kaiketsuki will stay with his or her creation until they are at least 50 years old to make sure they don't go blood crazy, you have been a delightful surprise. You have proven that I do not need to stay. I can return to my own home." Tanik concluded. Naruto gave his sensei a startled look. When Naruto realized what he had misnamed his master, he bit his breath and said, "Have I really met your expectations? I feel like there is so much more you can teach me. I don't want you to leave too." Sana. Tanik gave his student a pat on the back and a small laugh. The man grinned at his pupil, exposing all of his teeth, and revealing that one of them was slightly chipped. "The time I've spent watching over you has been very eye-opening. You have grown on me, Gaki. I can't deny that. However, I do have to return to my own home at some point. I promise that if you call upon me I will come, and if you ever need asylum from any troubles, I will open my own home to you as well." Naruto was unaware of this fact. It took another fang or something more powerful to break Kaiketsuki's incredibly strong teeth. An interesting fact was that they were almost impossible to break. Knowing that his teacher might dismiss his inquiry, Naruto questioned, "How did that happen?" "I was caught in a fight between an old friend and a friend turned enemy. My tribe was betrayed by him. His name was Maluki. He was a very headstrong male, and lost to my lover, Kaylee. She was the alpha female of the group, and he got jealous of me for winning her heart. He killed her and I stood up to him to fight him off, and he managed to chip my tooth. This cloak was from her." He looked at the cloak he was wearing. "It may not seem like it, but I have been on this planet for 1,000 years. I've watched the rise and fall of many civilizations, and this was the first that has ever kept my interest for as long as it has. Probably because it has so many interesting people. Like your mother and father, and yourself." The man breathed a sigh of relief and returned to lunar surface. The lust for blood would be at its peak and Akaiketsuki's abilities would be at their peak tomorrow night due to the full moon. With a little more focus on his eyes, Naruto looked at the moon once more and noticed movement across its surface, as though it were more than just a ball of matter that orbited the planet due to gravity. He sighed as he turned to listen to the sounds of people inside, the snores alerting him to the fact that everyone was sleeping and resting for the following day. Naruto knew without a doubt that everyone was anxious even though none of the other genin were aware of the attack plan. It would be the first real conflict in which they would all be involved that the Junin instructors couldn't completely defeat. The night went by swiftly as Naruto's mind raced through ideas about both this battle and his future. Unaware of the danger facing the entire group, he sat in a chair next to the bed where Hinata was sleeping soundly the following morning. He made a blood clone because he admired her blissful ignorance. Placing the seal on its forehead, he took a vial from his pocket that contained Tezuna's blood. After being instructed to follow the ninja group to the bridge, the clone sat in the living area of the small house and waited, looking around in confusion. A blood clone of Naruto and the real Tezuna waited alongside the other clone. Then, Naruto did something he had never done before. He covered his body with armor. It was sturdy enough to shield him from any damage this enemy could cause, but it was thin enough to not prevent him from fighting. Even though ordinary weapons are useless, Marcellus probably knew he was up against another Kaiketsuki and, if he had been wise, would have prepared more than just his bare hands and claws to combat them. Shortly after, Hinata, Kiba, Sasuke, and Sakura all woke up, and after each of them received an explanation. Sasuke's inevitable protest that, "I can do this alone," and Sakura's, "How is this even possible? Can we actually fight them off, and if so leave it to Sasuke and I," argument were all delivered. The group left for the bridge once everything had been resolved, the pair had been handled appropriately, and everyone had been ready. When the ninja realized they might be walking to their deaths, a solemn silence descended upon them. Though the details were still limited, Hinata knew they might be fighting to the death as Naruto held her hand tightly and assured her that he was there for her. Sakura appeared even worse, but Naruto had no desire to console her. He had a great deal of mistrust for her because she had been the cruelest person to him for the majority of his life. Akamaru was trembling in terror as Kiba gave him vigorous pats. For this battle, none of the genin were ready. Haku and Zabuza were in full battle armor and had already beaten them to the bridge. After giving them a nod, Naruto started getting ready for battle. He removed his gauntlets and showed his runes and seals to everyone. The runes and the chakra seals differed in that the former required less time to create but provided less storage capacity, while the latter required more time and had a higher storage requirement. A weapon with seals on it could add elements to it, but a weapon with runes on it could harm a Kaiketsuki. A fire aspect was added by a fire seal. One water aspect was added by a water seal, and so on. Naruto's blades were adorned with two distinct sets of runes and seals, each of which contained a unique set of abilities. Knowing that he would require them in some way, he had added them right before departing for the mission. He removed the blades from his arms and opened a pair of gloves that were plated in metal. There were several plates on the back of the hand and metal spikes running off the knuckles. Only Naruto could access the runes on the palms of each glove. As he acquired more equipment, Hinata reminded herself in her mind to ask him to teach her that trick. Fortunately for everyone, Sasuke and Sakura had remained silent, so Kaba, who hadn't spoken in Desa, was left to say something really important. Kakashi faceplanted, and Haru couldn't help but snort in response. "I want you all to know that if I die, Naruto, you can have Akamaru." Tanic grinned at the young boy's antics, which could have been serious. Knowing that they were fighting alongside him rather than against him, the missing nin said sternly, "I hope you brats take this seriously, because I couldn't stand a chance against the guy, and had to run away." Haku gave Naruto, who appeared fierce in his armor, one more look. Hinata gave Haku another look and couldn't help but be a little astounded by how well the girl was able to disguise herself as a man while wearing her battle kimono. It effectively concealed her features and shielded her from harm. She grabbed his arms and looked over them, asking, "Naruto, do you have anything in that arsenal of yours that I could use? Anything that would help?" With a laugh, he opened 2 tonfa, each with a tiny morning star fastened to a chain at the butt. She knew she could do a lot with her new weapons when he grinned at her and said, "This should do some serious damage, because they are chakra conductive. Go wild." She gave him a smile in return and gave them an experimental spin. She kept them because she liked the way they felt and told herself she should get holsters eventually. Everyone else maintained a neutral expression, but Kiba and Akamaru began to growl in anticipation. Naruto looked at the soon-to-be completed bridge while standing with his new friend Haku and the missing ninja. Given that Wave Country was a highly tropical region of the elemental nations, the day was beginning to turn overcast, which was typical. The waiting game would soon start as the other ninja surrounded them. Until he was sure there was enough cloud cover to allow him to be outside, Tanic hid in the shadows. Then there was no more waiting. The ninjas were eerily silent, but Naruto and Tanic could hear soft footsteps. A smooth voice from the other side of the incomplete bridge said, "Well, well, well. If it isn't the merry band of fools who dared to challenge me. And you, the blonde brat who dared to send an outside man to do your bidding. Isn't that low for a child? And such a noble ninja as well?" The enemy group had sailed in and scaled the sides. At the head of the group was Gadu, who was joined by a tall man dressed in royal purple. This man had a long face, long blonde hair, deep purple eyes, and a nose that seemed to be stuck in midair all the time. He gave the smaller group of ninja a bored glare until he noticed a new scent. Naruto was aware that Tanek's presence was also intended to deter the elder Kaiketsuki from pursuing him. He had properly sealed it, giving his natural scent, which smelled of human blood, a slightly muskier one. Humans smelled different by nature. Depending on what each person liked and didn't like, their blood types and other scents made them sweeter or more musky. Hinata had a lavender, vanilla, and cinnamon scent. Kiba, on the other hand, smelled of burnt wood and dogs. Since everyone has a different scent, Naruto had to constantly mask his own natural scent because it was different from a human's. The 2 elder Kaiketsuki suddenly charged into combat, hurling blows and attempting to kill one another with their weapons. Naruto said, "As soon as the other mercenaries show up, go wild." He didn't try to address the group politely because it was a battle and, for once, he was more knowledgeable than the Junin. Although it appeared as though he wanted to comment, Kakashi knew that his attempts at teaching were failing and that he would suffer harsh consequences. With a brief burst of speed, Naruto started to hit the taller man with his own blows. Given that creating a child was viewed as a sign of weakness, Tanic knew instinctively that he needed to attempt to conceal Naruto's true existence from the rival Kaiketsuki. To help him keep up with the more experienced fighters, Naruto took off his ankle weights for show. He could tell by the way Marcellus moved that he had almost no fighting experience, and he took advantage of a gap in the fight to give him a good swat at the chest. Unaware that his wound had not yet healed, the enemy growled, "You brat. Do you know how expensive this shirt is?" The smell of the thick blood that poured from the wound on his chest hit Naruto almost instantly. The smell was foul, combining decomposition, burnt flesh, and something Naruto didn't want to acknowledge. He let the blade in his right hand glow red while he activated one of his runes, then crept in to strike Marcellus again in the stomach. At that moment, Naruto recalled Haku's previous statement that Gadu had also been transformed into a Kaiketsuki. Tanic turned away and called, "Tanic, I'm going down to Gadu." Marcellus tried to attack Naruto at that point, but was thwarted by a blade to the neck. Naruto redirected Marcellus and charged in the direction of where he observed Zabuza struggling against Gadu, saying, "This blade has hurt you twice, and you don't heal. I am not your opponent. He is." His blade had no effect on the newly transformed Kaiketsuki's hard skin. "Get back!" Naruto yelled, and Zabuza leapt back just in time to allow Naruto to move between the 2 combatants and use his claws to block a blow from Gadu. Naruto had forgotten how strong he was as a newborn and had never engaged in combat with one before. Naruto was aware that he was the only free fighter who could accept this strength without dying because it was obvious and forward. Gadu's voice was greasy and his breath smelled like fresh blood as he said, "So you aren't just for talk, little brat." With a growl, Naruto activated another rune on his blade, turning it a bright blue and slicing through Gadus's right hand's fingers. "No, I'm not, and nor is the blade you have against your hand." The young Kaiketsuki let out a pained hiss as he tried to use his powers against the genin while glaring fiercely at Naruto. Naruto easily dodged the energy burst and was able to put Gadu in a headlock. He understood that the only reason he was outperforming this man was because he had not received any training and had not been a ninja prior to his transformation. Naruto found everything easier as a result, but Zabuza might not have performed well if he hadn't intervened. Naruto let a tiny bit of his strength seep into his grasp as he felt Gato struggle more as he was crushed. I'll let you in on a secret. Your master is supposed to train you in order to be able to use these powers. Poor you didn't get trained. At that moment, Zabuza made a mistake. He took the sword from Naruto's hand, which was still glowing blue, and used it to stab Gato in the chest. After a brief pause, Naruto could actually feel Gato in his arms turning to ash. He started to break and crumble, and his dust was carried away by the wind that blew through the area. After taking his sword from Zabuza and extending his hand, Naruto grinned and said, "I'm glad I got his money before he died. That could have been bad." Despite this, the missing nin shrugged and took Naruto's hand. "You take the kill credit. It was your weird glowing sword that did it." He withdrew his hand and remarked, "Damn kid, you're cold as ever." With a shrug of his own, Naruto turned to see Hinata dispatching mercenary after mercenary. A masked mercenary in a different time and place cried for his fallen brothers, but he continued to blow up the street because, well, why not? Anyway, with almost no problems with Gato himself, it was easy to try to get rid of the other grunts. While the rest were trying to use violence to extract their pay from those who were still able to pay them, many of them realized that their source of income had died and ran away, vowing never to work for a batshit crazy employer again. As they continued to kill men in silence as they went by, Kiba and Akamaru were a formidable force. They were heading toward Sakura, who had fainted shortly after the battle began and was as useless as Naruto had predicted. It would appear that Sasuke was doing well in fending off enemies, but that was what he had anticipated. Naruto focused more on Tanic and his opponent after noticing that everyone was doing well. Although Marcellus appeared to be in worse shape than Tanic, Naruto was aware that Tanic was growing more and more worn out every minute. Naruto jumped back into the battle with Tanic without hesitation, managing to position himself between the two men before either of them could deliver a lethal blow. Even if Naruto's words hadn't stopped the Kaiketsuki, they would have given Tanic a reprieve to fight on. "Marcellus, your employer, and creation, is dead. You have no reason to fight us now. I shall pay you as compensation, however this fight is over." Before he vanished, Marcellus sneered, "I know what I am, beaten brat. But just know, if I come across you and your creator ever again, I will not hesitate to kill both of you." Then Tanic moaned and sat down on the ground. Naruto grinned at his surrogate father and saw the smile concealed in the hood's shadows. "I haven't fought that hard in so long, I'm getting rusty." After returning from checking on the real bridge builder, not the clone Naruto had substituted for Hima, Hiku said, "We are finally done with this fight." At that moment, the villagers charged up the bridge. Naruto calmly walked over to where a sizable group had assembled to examine the damage and called, "Inari, what are you doing here?" They all carried improvised weapons and other items in an effort to fight, but they quickly discovered that it wasn't required. Despite having lost a tooth on the right side of his mouth, the young boy's smile was broad. "We thought we would help. I rallied the troops," he said. With a sly smile, Naruto ruffled his hair and rubbed his surrogate little brother's head. He exclaimed, "We have defeated the enemy." The cheers of the townspeople who had gathered could be heard beyond the bridge, where many women had gathered in the hopes of finding their husbands and children still alive. Approaching Naruto, Hinata put her arm around his waist. She was unharmed except for a cut across her cheek and a tiny abrasion on her right leg that appeared to be caused by a knife. Akamaru howled with Kiba as he finally broke his own silence with a loud battle cry. Knowing that he had been suppressing that for a long time, Anko and Haru laugh and give him a pat on the back. Sakura and Sasuke had been brought home by two clones, and Tazuna and Tsunami were informed that Wave was now at peace. The food and sake from Gato's hideout, which Naruto had raided to ensure that none of his grunts had returned to plot retaliation, were used to throw a party that evening. It goes without saying that our hero and his girlfriend had a great time that evening, safe behind at least 3 sound barriers. Within a week, everyone was eager to go again, but for Naruto and Tanic, it would be a bittersweet farewell because he was leaving in the same manner as he had arrived. Tanic didn't want a sentimental farewell, so he was going home, knowing that he would be asked to assist again later, according to a note Naruto discovered on the table. Naruto felt a single tear fall down his cheek as he looked in the direction his teacher would have been walking. He grinned and wiped away the tear before turning to rejoin his teams, who had started to make their way back to Konoha. "I won't let you down, 2.san."
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.